All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chaos Under Heaven, a weekly broadcast where we talk about current events, politics, economics, history, theory, peoples, places, and things from a far left Marxist Leninist perspective. I am your host, fellow traveler, aka Trav for short, and today I am joined by a subscriber and an active member of the Discord server who goes by the name Gangaros. So,
Or
Gangaros, would
just
you like to
Jing.
tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am Gendros. I am, or Jing for short. I've been part of I've been pretty much a communist for at least 4 or 5 years now. Um, and I've been a Maoist third worldist for the last couple of months now. Generally speaking, I've been pretty much a staunch anti-imperialist my whole life. I am almost 30. Um, and pretty much I am trying to expand my study into theory. That's the one thing I've just been lacking a bit, is that I need to expand my theory, but I generally have a pretty good grasp of at least the basics of it.
Right, yeah. Um, I'm sort of in the same place that you are. I'm steadily approaching the age of 30 as well. Oh my God, I'm going to be 30 here in a few years. I turned 28 here in July, but anyways, uh, before we begin, quick little token announcements. Shout out to my Patreons. Gratuity is greatly appreciated. Um, if you would like to contribute to my work in a meaningful, direct material fashion, that is a great way to raise morale and keep me honest. Um, at the same time, weekly readings, Marxist readings. If you're interested in learning Marxist theory and learning leftist theory and generally being a better political scientist, scientific socialist, and or Marxist-Leninist in general, I highly advise you join the Discord, linked in the description below. Today and tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern to 7:30 Eastern, all the way up to 8 o'clock, but with lately how long our classes have been running, they've been going quite a bit longer than that. But 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern is the tentative time for our weekly Marxist readings. I try to attend both, but in general, I usually only do Saturday. I may or may not be there personally, but really it's my mod Eco Marxist who is the one running that project. So these courses to your benefit. It is directly within your material interest to join this course because by participating and engaging, you will be actively learning in a very important dialogue with other Marxists. So, I have a couple stories I want to review here before we really get to the bread and butter of this. But let me go ahead and put these in the tab first. But oh yeah, so gas prices. Have you seen them soaring?
Yeah, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
seeing them soaring a bit. Apparently, it's like $5 a gallon or something
Oh,
like that.
fuck
Something
yeah, dude.
ridiculous.
Fuck yeah. Gas prices are soaring. Americans should get ready for $5 a gallon gas, analyst warns. So, Americans can expect increasing pain at the pump as rising oil costs, along with rising demand and reduction in supply, continue to push prices at gas stations across the US. That spike is unlikely to ease anytime soon as Russia's war with Ukraine intensifies, experts say. The current national average price of gas has soared to 378 a gallon, jumping 20 cents in the last week alone. According to Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, fuel costs are roughly $1 from a year ago. Industry data shows a blow for millions of Americans grappling with a broad increase in inflation. So yeah, the inflation of gasoline is also going to cause the prices of everything else to go up as well because of the increased cost of transportation. So, in addition to the supply chain issues we're experiencing contributing to overall broad consumer inflation, in the face of wages that aren't really keeping up very well, you also have the widespread inflation within the gas and oil market. As it turns out, when you have a major oil producer, a major petro state, which exports a lot of oil, you take that oil off the market and you sanction that petrostate, as it turns out, it's going to reduce supply. And with demand already steadily on the rise, it is going to have dastardly effects on the economy down the line. I just wanted to bring up this little factoid first, just to set the tone and the pacing for all of this. I got a couple other stories as well. So this is just one effect of the war that we're directly feeling. We're feeling the ripple effects of the Russian-Ukrainian war across the globe right now. Another way that we're going to feel the ripple effects is going to be in a surge in COVID cases. Sorry about that. So, Putin's invasion of Ukraine will trigger a spike of COVID cases because a country is so poorly vaccinated. Lancet's editor warns. Risk of COVID could spike in Ukraine during Russian invasion, likely, scientists warn. Scale of outbreaks impossible to measure as surveillance system disrupted. Health impacts will be severe, with treatment and supply chain disrupted. Yep, you've got millions of refugees which were immediately that were immediately created by this crisis. Yeah, this website's giving my computer AIDS, but so yeah, millions of refugees fleeing the region, and without any public health data or trackers, you're bound to get a surge in new COVID cases, especially in a country which, as said by the editor, is fairly poorly vaccinated. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of spread of COVID. So that's another ripple effect, particularly in Europe. But if America starts taking refugees, you will see it there as well. And of course, we don't really need to go over this, but yeah, White House details new sanctions on Russian and Belarusian entities, including targeting Russian oil refining. The White House on Wednesday detailed a new slate of economic measures against Russia and its ally Belarus, condemning Belarus for enabling Putin's invasion of Ukraine. In addition, the U.S. and allies are identifying 22 Russian defense-related entities, including firms that provide technological and material support for the Russian military. Announced Wednesday are the latest round of sanctions against Moscow that the United States and its allies have introduced in an attempt to cripple Russia's economy in response to its invasion in Ukraine. Previous rounds here have included sanctions related to the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, sanctions against Russia's largest banks, and Russia's removal of from SWIFT, the high-security network that connects thousands of financial institutions around the world. On Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden announced during the State of the Union address that the U.S. would join other countries in banning Russia's aircraft from U.S. airspace. In the sanctions announced Wednesday, the U.S. and its allies are also targeting technology exports in the oil refining sector, which they say could help the U.S. move towards a goal of degrading Russia's status as a leading energy supplier over time. We don't have a strategic interest in reducing the global supply of energy, Principal Deputy Press Secretary Karen Jean-Pierre told reporters aboard Air Force One. Jean-Pierre said that sanctioning Russian oil would raise prices at the gas pump for Americans. So, yeah, as I stated a moment ago, when you sanction a major oil producer, you have the direct impact of making fuel and everything in general more expensive for your average working Americans and Europeans, because we bring in a lot of oil from Russia. So,
and it doesn't help that the oil is not nationalized. It's owned by a few multinational corporations as well.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is we don't actually know how much oil we have. You know, people talk about peak oil this, peak oil that. I mean, you've said in one of our conversations before that you think we've hit peak oil. There's no real way of knowing, because if we did hit peak oil, we wouldn't know about it because companies keep that information proprietary. So I'm sure we do have a lot of oil, and that we're probably not going to run out anytime soon, but we have no way of knowing whether or not we've hit peak oil. We don't know how much oil we actually have. You know, last year, Russia and Saudi Arabia were having a production war because they were both having booming oil industry, and it actually threatened the economy because the driving down of the oil prices threatened profit margins, because if they sell below a certain price, they don't make money. So America was thinking and contemplating of burying, hundreds of thousands, millions of barrels of oil just because we're overstocked in supply.
Yeah, further proof we need to get off oil as a energy resource, to say the least. And that would definitely be something socialist economy would transition towards removing.
Yeah, exactly. So Russia nationalized its oil industry, but it is, for all intents and purposes, private property. So I would
A
not
lot of
say,
a lot of countries nationalize their oil industry. I'm pretty sure. I believe Venezuela also did that prior to
yeah.
Hugo Chavez coming in.
Yeah, so nationalization doesn't really mean that much. It's about the class nature of the state and how it's being operated. So that's a different conversation entirely. The reason why I brought up these facts and arguments in general is to showcase the ripple effects that are being felt across the world. But for those of you who missed my last stream, here's a quick recap. So, 2014, Maidan uprisings depose the pro Russian government and replace it with the NATO sympathetic Zelensky regime. In reaction to the Maidan coup, Russia annexes the Crimean Peninsula, taking the Black Sea and those oil deposits directly out of the hands of Ukraine and potentially NATO. Then Russia begins to provide arms and military support to breakaway insurgent groups within Donetsk and Luhansk, Donbass and Luhansk. Yeah, I believe those are the regions. So yeah, for the last 8 years, these Russian-backed insurgents have been fighting within these breakaway regions, trying to declare themselves national sovereign territory. And just 15 minutes ago, Russia has recognized them. Just 15 minutes ago, after all these years, going into Ukraine and seizing initially Donbass and Luhansk. And this has been done, obviously, because Ukraine has recently threatened to join NATO. Ukraine has recently threatened to join NATO. So in response, Russia moves in. It looks like Ukraine's being serious. We see that troop presence build up on the border, and that's basically when Russia and Ukraine go to war. And as Russia pushes further into the country, the war continues to wage on. We don't really have a lot of facts on the ground right now. I have a lot of pictures I can show you guys, which I will show you in a moment. But from here, I'm going to pull up an Al Jazeera article, which has summarized a lot of the key points thus far. We'll talk about the sanctions here in a moment, because I actually want to talk a little bit more about those. So, sharing my window, let's do this again. Russia has 10 royals per gallon already. It's 2009 all over again. Yeah, they're just about $5 here. Yeah, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Comments below. Feel free to leave a comments in the live chat below if you are experiencing extraordinarily high gas prices. Russia-Ukraine war by the numbers, live tracker. So, anywho, I got my little facts on the ground here. Little facts on the ground. Right now, I believe Zelensky, Kiev, and Moscow have traded accusations on the attack. Ukraine, its Western allies, United Nations, nuclear watchdog have said Russian attacks sparked the blaze. But this is what the war zone looks like right now. So we got Donbass. We have Crimea, which was already annexed. But as we've seen, look at this troop presence right here. So where I'm hovering my mouse right now is the Donetsk region, which is where one of Ukraine's largest oil deposits are. Over in Lviv over here, there's another very large oil deposit just north of Moldova. And I think what's going to end up happening is Russians are basically going to sever the entire Black Sea shore, completely seizing it from Ukraine. And they are also going to move this way, seizing the oil in the region north of Moldova. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. They're basically going to dismember Ukraine, and they're going to take the oil deposit south of Chernobyl, north of Moldova. Here, they're going to take the oil deposit in Donetsk, and they're going to take the entirety of the Black Sea. That way they can deny Ukraine, and by extension NATO, any sort of geographical edge over the Black Sea, which, as stated in a previous live stream, is a region by which a great deal of international trade and traffic goes to and from. A lot of trade transpires out from the Black Sea into the Aegean, into the Mediterranean, South China Sea, and so on. But as I was saying, well, not South China Sea. So Ukraine has its operational power plants. So Russia's been shelling cities, trying to seize power plants, and approximately 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees have been created in the last week, fleeing into Poland, Moldova, Romania, and the other neighboring regions.
It's
I believe
1.5 now.
What's up? 1.5?
1.5 million now. Plus.
Yeah, well, it was 1.2 as of the release of Al Jazeera's article. So we're looking at about 700,000 to Poland, 150,000 to Hungary, 100,000 to Moldova, 90,000 to Slovakia, 53,000 in Russia, 57,000 in Romania, and about 400 in Belarus. And at least 111,000 have also fled to other European countries as well. And this is live comments I wanted to make, or a community post, but I wanted to talk about how crazy it is that these Eastern European countries are willing to welcome these people with open arms. You know, millions of refugees have been created in the wake of Afghanistan, Syria, as well as Yemen, and all these poor Middle Eastern countries that are being bombed, these poor African countries that are being bombed. All these refugees have been made left and right. You've got refugees that have been made out of Latin Americans from U.S. imperialism. You got refugees, climate refugees, which are actually going to be growing and slowly ramping up and increasing over the coming decades in the wake of our shorelines disappearing, crop failure, famine, disease, and general immiseration. And it's crazy because all these countries plus the U.S. were stomping their feet about taking in any refugees. We can't take in any more refugees. We can't take in any refugees. But look how quick they were to welcome Ukrainians in with open arms. Isn't it funny? Don't you find that the slight bit interesting?
Yeah, there is definitely some white European privilege, to say the least, on this particular subject. Um, I'd also I'd like to know like what kind of effects this is going to have on those neighboring countries, maybe specifically with just arms flowing in, because I'm just thinking back to Libya now, because these kinds of things, yeah.
Europe is pumping weapons like the NATO, the United States and NATO. Ukrainian troops are armed with NATO and U.S. bombs, U.S. missiles, U.S. weapons, U.S. jets and tanks. They're using our gear. We're pumping, billions of dollars of arms into Ukraine so that they can fight Russia. Fucking Zelensky has been basically telling the Ukrainian citizenry to take up arms against the invading Russians. So he's telling, his own citizenry, civilians, to go out and fucking go fight and die against the Russians, basically. Go fight for your country, take these Kalashnikovs. Wonderful, isn't it?
So, yeah. I could give some details because I'm a pretty good historian when it comes to stuff like World War II. And if I were to compare it to anything of World War II, Kiev at the moment seems to me like Berlin in 1945. And I'm not comparing the Ukrainian regime to Nazi Germany or Zelensky to Hitler or anything like that. I'm just saying the situation is very similar because you have a Russian army that's trying to encircle the capital. The population has not been ordered to withdraw or anything like that. It appears that they're going to start bombing it soon, which they apparently have already started bombing it. They're giving out weapons like crazy to the civilians. And Zelensky has also not left the capital either. This is also something very symbolic. This is always, it makes you seem like your regime is stable. It makes it seem like, you're tough, that you're not going to give in. If you flee right away, you're going to look like, it's not good for
exactly. I would say if Zelensky really gave a fuck about his country and his people, if he really cared, in my opinion, I think he should just capitulate. For one, I think he really should have just capitulated. Like the second the Russians were building up military presence, I would have honestly, if I were him, I would have just been like, okay, we won't join NATO, we'll stay neutral, and I would have tried to mend relations with the Russians, and yeah, more or
If I
less.
was him, I'd try to reestablish the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. But
Well, yeah,
then
but
again, I'm not bourgeoisie. Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying.
that would literally never happen.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm just saying like he should capitulate because like I really don't think. I mean, Russia could win. I mean, this is probably going to end up turning into a Syria or Vietnam for Russia, just an unwinnable war where the population just keeps fighting no matter what and continues to fight, and Ukraine just in general just goes to shit. You're going to see a ramping up a reaction to the Russian invasion in the form of Ukrainian ultra nationalism. I mean, there's already a shit ton of Nazis in the Ukrainian government and military, but I just think that the fascist sentiments are only going to get worse.
Yeah.
But
I was
otherwise,
I was listening to a Ukrainian American, and he basically said that this is pretty much like has done the exact opposite of destroying morale in Ukraine. There was a really good documentary I was watching about Hitler, and there was this young child who was alive during the Nazi regime, and he remembers the bombings that happened during like 1943 when the Allies started dropping bombs on Germany, and they were in the bomb shelter. And he was basically saying that maybe Churchill and Roosevelt thought that they could maybe demoralize the German people, but the opposite
no,
came about.
they're just going to keep fighting you. That's the problem. I don't
Yeah,
think Russia is going to occupy Ukraine long term. I think the whole point of this stunt was basically to force Ukraine to stay out of NATO. I mean,
but
Russia could
they
occupy and conquer and absorb Ukraine, but I don't think that's going to be the outcome. I think the more likely outcome is that they are going to sever Donbass as well as like this northern region right here where those oil deposits are. I think they're just going to take Ukraine's oil and that they're just going to leave the rest of the country a tattered fucking mess. I think this is a step closer to World War III. I know the EU so far, EU, NATO isn't getting involved. Because they don't want to directly fight Russia because they know World War III, mutually assured destruction. The losses in human life would be absolutely catastrophic. So they're using Ukraine as a proxy force, pumping all these weapons and arms into the country.
so a couple things. See, the problem with Ukraine not joining NATO is basically might makes right. I mean, I hate to break it to anybody, but like what we've learned over the years is might makes right. Like seriously, like North Korea. Why has North Korea not been invaded? It has nuclear weapons. Ukraine was invaded after it gave up its nuclear weapons in 1991, and there's no real reason why Ukraine wouldn't just join NATO even after Russia left. Like, there's nothing there. You would have to install a puppet regime by Russia in Ukraine. And even then, I don't know how much of this has to do with NATO and how much of it to resources, or it could just be a full-on resource grab.
Yeah, that's my position. I largely think it's a resource grab, but I think there are two main reasons. Geopolitical or geographic security is the first one. A NATO-aligned Ukraine would have been very fucking. It would have spelled very bad news for Russia. Um, Otherwise, I want to get to these anti-war protests, but someone's saying I'm worried about how medias are being censored due to this. I'm scared that we would lose means of communication. I mean, Russians are being censored. Russians are being blacked out from the internet right now. You have Russia Today, which is being censored, which I think is a travesty. I think it's an absolutely bad thing, because Russia Today was actually doing relatively objective reporting on the situation in Russia. They weren't just simping to Russia, and they were actually giving some objective reporting. And now, like, they've been silenced just because, like, the narrative, they aren't spinning the narrative like CNN is. They're not trying to spin a narrative. They're actually presenting the facts. And now they're being censored as Russian propaganda, fake news. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
I got to go to the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back.
yeah,
2
go
seconds.
ahead. Go ahead. All right. So anti-war protests. Thousands of people have taken to public squares and Russian embassies across the globe. OVD Info, which has documented crackdowns on Russia's opposition for years, says that more than 5,000 demonstrators have been arrested across Russia since Vladimir Putin launched the war in Ukraine. The map and list below shows locations where sizable protests have occurred. So yeah, these are where the protests have occurred, and this is a long list of cities. Conflict at a glance. After months of tension and intense diplomacy, Russian forces invade Ukraine. Explosions were heard across the country. Kiev declared martial law, saying Ukraine will defend itself. Below is a summary of the conflict at a glance. So, this is the summary. February 24th, March 21st, Russia troops begin amassing along the border. Estimated 100,000 Russian soldiers are concentrated along the border. Russia, NATO, and the OSCE hold talks. The U.S. and Russia meet in Geneva to de-escalate tensions in Ukraine, but differences remain unresolved. NATO puts troops on standby. Ukraine and Russia conduct military drills. Putin orders Russian forces and rebels to he orders Russian forces to Ukrainian rebel regions. Western powers call for more sanctions on Russia. Russia launches full-scale invasion. This is just the history of the Soviet Union and its breakup. And I think and this is a summary of the leadership of Russia. But anyways, so Ukraine has an estimated population of 44 million. The country comprises 24 regions known as oblasts. The country's population has declined since the 90s, with fertility rates among the lowest in the world. Geez, I wonder why. As of 2020, Ukraine's fertility rate is 1.2. For context, in order for a population to remain stable, overall fertility rate of 2.1 is required. So Ukraine is it's the second largest country in Europe after Russia. Ukraine is a bit smaller than the U.S. state of Texas, but about 3 times smaller than India. So Ukraine's a big country. Its fertility rate has dipped. Its fertility rate's continuing to decline. So fertility rates really across Eastern Europe have crashed. And it has been since the fall of communism. I discussed this on my last stream, of course. That's all I have to say. I'm going to go ahead and link the Al Jazeera article if you guys are interested in referencing it. But it's in the chat now if you'd like to go to it. But anyways, where was I? All right. So let's have a little discussion. Just a little summary of a couple other points I wanted to make. But just a couple memes that I want to quickly debunk. Again, Russia gives fuck all about the minorities in Ukraine, let alone the Nazis. They don't give a fuck about the Nazis. They don't give a fuck about Russian minorities and their national sovereignty. Otherwise, if they really cared, they would have moved in to seize Donbass much, much sooner. However, they only went to act when Ukraine threatened to join NATO. And also, they're allies with Israel. More evidence that they don't give a fuck about minorities. But anyways.
And plus, they have a huge Nazi population.
There's plenty of fascism in Russia as well. Don't kid yourself. There's plenty of Nazism in Russia. But anyways. But yeah, no. They didn't do it to save racial or ethnic minorities or to stop Nazis. Don't fucking kid yourself. It's like saying the justification for NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia in the 90s was legitimate because they were moving to protect minorities as well, They were trying to stop ethnic cleansing being done by Serbians. So The real reason why Russia's in Ukraine is because Ukraine is a competitor on the global oil market. Russia's a petrostate. Ukraine has an estimated 1.4 trillion barrels of oil underground that is yet to be tapped into. And for Ukraine to cozy up to NATO, for Ukraine to be friends with NATO, it one fucks Russia from a security standpoint because now NATO can just continue to amass their highly advanced fuck you military right to the border of Russia, the utmost most western border of Russia. That's the first thing. Which and two, oil. They just eliminated a competitor. So what Russia did in the short term was actually highly beneficial to their regime. Beneficial to the regime because they just cut out a competitor that would have been undercutting them on the oil market. So yeah, they're dealing with sanctions now, and they're dealing with sanctions at the time being. But all in all, they succeeded in keeping. So far, I think they're going to succeed in keeping Ukraine out of NATO for one, but I also think that they're going to succeed in keeping that oil out of their hands as well. Russia can sell to other people besides the U.S. and the West. They can sell to China. You know, China doesn't give a fuck. I'm pretty sure China's going to buy Russia's oil just fine. But yeah, no. At the moment, people are being bombed and killed and fucked up. As of now, the casualties, the estimated casualties, I believe, are in the thousands. Like, to be exact, I believe it's about 800 people, around 800 people, 700 and some odd people are like the actual casualties of the war. Millions of refugees have been immediately created. And right now, liberals on social media only care, people seem to only care because it's a country full of white people. It's a country full of Europeans. As I stated earlier, millions of refugees have been created in the wake of United States and Western imperialist aggression all over the fucking globe. And now we're going to be having waves of millions of climate refugees. And, you know, we were turning away all these Middle Eastern, all these black, brown, and yellow and red refugees that are coming in from all these other nations and countries that we have utterly fucked with our foreign policy. And, you know, we're more than happy to turn them away. But, Ukrainians fleeing from the big bad Asiatic horde of Russians, we welcome them with open arms. So I just wanted to point to kind of like the unconscious racism that kind of exists, that's instilled within the minds of people. You ever notice that?
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible to say the least. I think also a lot of it has to do with also like what the United States, NATO, and Western imperialism approves of, gives their stamp of approval of like what is something that they need to care about. So
Yeah.
like something like the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, that's something they got to care about. But the Palestinians in Israel, no. So this is the kind of like, you know, it's a combination of like racism and what the media, what is part of, quote, the agenda, basically.
It's just crazy because Ukraine is a fucking poor, broke ass third world country, just like all these other areas. But because it's full of white people, that's when they care. I believe we're all familiar with this tweet, this famous racist tweet that I'm talking about.
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
Yeah. No, it's only a problem now that it's fucking white people, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go. I'm leaving that tweet right there. Beautiful, beautiful. That's just a fucking testimony to the subconscious white Eurocentrism and white supremacy that has been ingrained in the liberals' mind. So it's just crazy because, like, though we've made all this progress against racism and white supremacy, it still exists. It's alive and well. and fascism flows through the veins of liberal countries, capitalist countries across the globe, not just America. It's only especially bad in Eastern Europe because the times are desperate and the people have been denied communism as an alternative and brainwashed against it, you know? So, like, anyways, let's go ahead and talk about imperialism, or what exactly is imperialism. Let's talk about a proper Marxist position on this whole thing. So, there are a lot of people, a lot of goofballs on the internet that say critical support for the Russian invasion, or that we should support Russia's actions here. We absolutely fucking shouldn't, and we shouldn't support NATO either. I got flack for this whole fence post sitting both sides are bad, but like they're both fucking imperialists. I mean, people will try and sit here and say Russia's not really imperialist. I mean, we can argue over the technical definition or not. I would say irredentist. Are you familiar with the term irredentist? That's a more
Yeah, I am familiar with the term
Yeah.
irredentist, but I would still stand by that Russia is imperialist, at least based off this article that
send me the
Paul
article.
Connolly. Yeah, I'll send it again. Paul Connolly shared this, and I thought it was really.
Send it to me over Discord. Is it from the Espresso Stalinist?
Yes.
All right, I'll go ahead and pull that up, and we can go through some excerpts. But yeah, so in regards to Russia, I think the most accurate description is irredentist. It is within Russia's interest to eat and absorb its neighbors, at least modern day Russia. So I'm going to go ahead and full screen now, and we can go through some excerpts from this article. Concentration of capital in Russia. Russia, there's an extreme concentration of capital to the degree that exceeds the imperialist powers in Lenin's time. As Maoists, we should be clear that contemporary Russian imperialism was built upon the concentration of capital that existed in the social imperialist USSR. Oh, so it's from these goofballs. The vast majority of this capital was not destroyed after the collapse. I mean, a lot of it was just sucked out of the country. It was reorganized and concentrated in a small number of hands. The US-led imperialist bloc tried to seize control of this formation, but was unable to, which allowed the new bourgeoisie in the USSR, former USSR, transform into an independent national bourgeoisie. So basically, based on official statistics, top 600 firms in Russia account for 70% of its GDP. In imperialism, Lenin analyzed the concentration of production into a number of the capitalist countries at the time. So, based on the statistics available, he demonstrated that the economic basis of imperialism in the U.S. in 1909, the largest 30,000 firms accounted for 44% of total GDP, and America was absolutely a imperialist power. So, basically, Russia is even more concentrated and centralized as the modern day oligarchy is today than America and Britain were back in the early 1900s. So that's a point.
And we have to point out too that it's called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, because this is how all capitalist nations go towards. Some of them don't make it in the long run, but the bigger ones definitely do head that way.
Some of them do. So this is just demonstrating the existence of finance capital in Russia. I mean, there's finance capital in Russia. You can't even deny this. They have stock market. They have finance capital. Point is that so they have finance capital. They're the merging of banking and industrial capital into a singular financial entity. So
yeah. Also, we were talking about the sanctions. We should have also mentioned as well, the ruble lost 50% of its value since the invasion, and based off what that Ukrainian American that I was listening to, Russia has about 3 months until the sanctions really start hitting in from things like SWIFT and other such things. Yeah. So they got 3 months before the proverbial shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
What they need done.
I want to get through this article, and we will talk about the sanctions right afterwards. The executives of Sberbank are quite upfront about this on their about page, saying that the circulatory system of the Russian economy accounted for 1/3 of its banking system. The banks provide employment and a source of income for every 150th Russian family. And the bank is the key lender to the Russian economy and the biggest receiver of deposits in Russia. So they have the Sberbank, they have Gazprom, which has a monopoly on the gas industry in Russia. So yeah. Then we have the export of capital by Russian firms. Gazprom has subsidiaries in 36 countries outside of Russia. In 2016, Rosneft purchased a 98% stake in the India-based oil company SR Oil. So Russia is exporting capital. They are exporting capital. Overall, Russian direct investment abroad exceeds 440 billion. While this pales in comparison to the 5 trillion that the US has in foreign direct investment, it still represents a significant, like Russia's a world power, people. It is, for all intents and purposes, a world power. It's no longer the world's number 2 superpower. It's more like the number 8th or the number 9th. But I mean, due to the sizable military that it inherited, as well as like the economic prosperity. I mean, what economic infrastructure they had, they owe to the Soviet Union. Same with their military, the sizable military they inherited. So modern day Russia, while not being a badass Soviet Union anymore, it's still. My point is that though the bear has been declawed and defanged and castrated, the bear is still a bear nonetheless. So the export of capital by Russian firms, struggle between imperialist powers, this fucking war. Let's see what else. Conclusion. So just going through that real quickly. So we go through it. We find all the components of capital. And for those of you who are interested in further reading, I have, of course, posted the Espresso Stalinist right here. You may copy and paste that into your browsers. But anyways, providing works cited as I go. But all right, so Russia is an imperialist power. It's not as developed, and its wealth isn't as concentrated at the same degree as the United States and the Western imperial powers. I mean, you know what I mean? Like Western Europe and the US, that's pretty much these countries plus their junior partners and offshoots are pretty much the imperialist bloc of the world, constituting 14% of the population while consuming and holding 80% of its wealth and resources. So Russia is periphery, but we need to keep in mind that imperialism is a state of being. It is a state of being. It isn't just like it isn't just an action. It's a state of being. It's a degree of capitalist development. And like you said, not all capitalist countries reach the stage of imperialism. But Russia, by these parameters, technically has, and it actually has. But it's not as powerful. It doesn't pose as much of a threat, and it hasn't engaged in anything near on the level of barbarism and, you know, genocide and brutality and inhumanity and atrocities and crimes against humanity that the United States or France, Britain, Germany have. It hasn't done anything resembling that. Like, don't kid yourself. It hasn't done anywhere near as much damage to the world. It hasn't, you know, gone around building military bases, overthrowing governments and coups left and right. Russia is nowhere near as bad as the US and NATO. I am stating this right now. I want to acknowledge this. Russia is but it's a much smaller player on the world stage, is the point I'm trying to get at. It's a smaller player at the world stage, being a smaller, less aggressive imperialist power that isn't damaging the world as much, does not change the fact that it meets all of the classifications necessary to be identified as an imperialist power.
So I think a good analogy would probably be maybe the British would represent the Americans and NATO, and you got like the German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman empires. Those would represent like modern day Russia. These kind of like they've some stagnated, but they've been trying to catch up with development and having a very autocratic system. But I think that's a really good analogy between the two. It's basically like, you know, they're trying to be the rising power versus the
Yeah.
status quo, great imperial powers. And the only reason Russia hasn't been able to, like, do anything as horrible as the United States has is because they're not the ones on top. If they were on
Yeah.
top, obviously, then it'd be it'd be a disaster. But yeah.
Yeah. So, couple things. So Russia's imperialist, and I will get you. We'll come back to your question in a moment. But so Russia's imperialist. U.S. and NATO are imperialist, but Russia is a smaller, less significant, much less powerful, far less wealthy, much less influential imperialist power. Like, there's a reason why Russia can't go around sanctioning countries left and right, but the U.S. can, and it's because world reserve currency, because the US and NATO bloc countries pretty much have all this investment everywhere, all these financial assets and interests in everywhere. They dominate the world market and control the world market and global trade to such a degree, not including the petrodollar, including their ability to project military presence due to all the military bases everywhere. Point is that it is much easier for US and NATO to dominate, exert its will, and exploit and genocide and fuck over countries and just absolutely ruin and plunder countries. It is much easier for them to do it. And it's much easier, it's just for the sheer level of economic dominion they have. There's a reason why the West can sanction Russia and fuck their economy, but Russia can't go vice versa. So, in that regard, let's go ahead and talk about these sanctions. These sanctions do hurt the oligarchs because they're seizing and freezing their assets of investment in other countries. But you want to know who these sanctions hurt a lot more than the oligarchs? The Russian people.
Yep.
Russian people, all of a sudden, they can't log on to certain websites. They can't order certain things online. They can't do business with certain companies. They've been shut out of the global market. They're being sanctioned. The value of the ruble has plummeted. Life for your average Russian is about to get much harder and miserable. Russia is about to enter a great deal of economic turmoil. Now, this is not good. And in that regard, if you guys really want to know what the proper Marxist-Leninist position is on all of this, in the face of all of this, it is to stand in solidarity with the international proletariat. This doesn't just include the proletariat of Russia, but the proletariat of Ukraine as well. The Russian proletariat and the Ukrainian proletariat, neither of them are our enemies. They are our allies. They are our comrades. These are the people that we need to stand in solidarity and support, not just in their regular everyday struggles, but in their struggle against the imperialists and their own governments. The imperialists and their own government is what they need to oppose. So we have a duty as Marxist-Leninists to recognize our class interest, our collective class interest, and to build international solidarity among friends and among nations, and stand together as a singular international proletariat, drawing the line between ourselves and our interests and that of the imperialists, the transnational bourgeoisie, and the governments of the world. So to support the Russian government in this instance, to support NATO, to support either side, is actually an improper position. And Russian people do not deserve to suffer. Ukrainian people do not deserve to suffer, but they're all suffering because capitalism inherently leads to this, and it's the capitalist class that which uphold the system. So I've got this document, this wonderful document you leaked, but I think we should go through some excerpts. Would you like to read? Would you like to go through some excerpts? I'd like to take turns reading some of this. This is Revolutionary Defeatism by Vladimir Lenin, or The Defeat of One's Own Government in the Imperialist War. You guys want to know what a proper Marxist-Leninist take is? You want to know what a principled take is? You want to know what a good take is on this entire situation? Revolutionary Defeatism and International Class Solidarity, and recognizing who our real class enemies are. So I'm going to read some of this. During the Revolutionary War, and a revolutionary class cannot but desire the defeat of its government. This axiomatic and disputed only by consciousness partisans or helpless satellites of the social chauvinists. Among the former, for instance, in Semkoski's of the organizing committee, and among the latter, Trotsky in Bukovoyed and Kautsky in Germany, to desire Russia's defeat, Trotsky writes, an uncalled for and absolutely unjustifiable concession to the political methodology of social patriotism, which would replace the revolutionary struggle against the war and the conditions causing it with an orientation highly arbitrary in the present conditions towards the lesser evil. Right there. Right there. This is an instance of a high-flown phraseology in which Trotsky always justifies opportunism. A revolutionary struggle against the war is merely an empty and meaningless exclamation, something at which the heroes of the Second International excel. Unless it means revolutionary action against one's own government, even in wartime, one has only to do some thinking in order to understand this. Wartime revolutionary action against one's own governments indubitably means but not only desiring its defeat, but really facilitating such defeat. The phrase bandying Trotsky has completely lost his bearing on a simple issue. It seems to him that to desire Russia's defeat means desiring the victory of Germany. But Trotsky regards this as the methodology of social patriotism, to help people who are to help people that are unable to think for themselves. The Berne Resolution made it clear that in all imperialist countries, the proletariat must now desire the defeat of its own government. Bukovoyed and Trotsky preferred to avoid this truth, while Semkovsky, an opportunist who was more useful to the working class than all the others, thanks to his naive, frankly reiteration of bourgeois wisdom, blurted out the following: "This is nonsense because either Germany or Russia can win." Take the example of the Paris Commune. France was defeated by Germany, but the workers were defeated by Bismarck. Had Bukovoyed and Trotsky had done little thinking, they would have realized that they have adopted the viewpoint on the war held by governments and the bourgeoisie, i.e., that they cringe to the political methodology of social patriotism, to use Trotsky's pretentious language. A revolution in wartime means civil war. The conversion of a war between governments into the civil war is, on one hand, facilitated by military reserves of defeats of governments, and on the other hand, one cannot actually strive for such conversation without thereby facilitating defeat. The reason why the chauvinists repudiate the defeat slogan is that this slogan alone implies a consistent call for revolutionary action against one's own governments in wartime. Without such action, millions of ultra-revolutionary phrases, such as a war against the war and the conditions, etc., are worth less farthing. Anyone who would in all earnests refute the slogan or defeat of one's own government in an imperialist war should prove one of three things. Number one, that the War of 1415 is not reactionary. 2, that a revolution stemming from that war is impossible. Or 3, that coordination and mutual aid are possible between revolutionary movements in all the belligerent countries. The third point is particularly important to Russia, the most backward country where an immediate socialist revolution is impossible. That is why the Russian Social Democrats had to be the first to advance the theory and practice of the defeat slogan. The Tsarist government was perfectly right in asserting that the agitation conducted by the Russian Social Democratic Labor Group in the Duma, the sole instance in the International, not only of parliamentary opposition, but a genuine revolutionary anti-government agitation among the masses, that this agitation has weakened Russia's military might and is likely to lead to its defeat. This is a fact to which it is foolish to close one's eyes. The opponents of the defeat slogan are simply afraid of themselves when they refuse to recognize the very obvious facts that the inseparable links between revolutionary agitation against the government and helping bring about its defeat. The coordination and mutual aid possible between the Russian movement, which is revolutionary in the bourgeois democratic sense, and the socialist movement in the West. No socialist who has publicly spoken on the matter during the last decade has doubted this, the movement among Austrian proletariat after 1905 actually proving it possible. Asking any social democrat who calls himself an internationalist whether or not he approves of an understanding between the social democrats of the various belligerent countries on joint revolutionary action against all belligerent governments, many of them will will reply that it is impossible, as Kautsky has done, thereby fully proving his social chauvinism. This, on one hand, is a deliberate and vicious lie which clashes with the generally known facts of the Basile Manifesto. On the other hand, if it were true, the opportunists would be quite right in many respects. Many will voice their approval of such understanding. To this day, we shall say, if this approval is not hypocritical, it is ridiculous to think that in wartime, and for the conduct of a war, some formal understanding is necessary, such as the election of representatives, the arrangement of meetings, the signing of an agreement, and the choice of the day and hour. Only the Semkovskys are capable of thinking so. An understanding on revolutionary action in every single country, to say nothing of a number of countries, can be achieved only by the forces of an example of serious revolutionary action, by launching such action and developing it. However, such action cannot be launched without desiring the defeat of the government and without contributing to such defeat. The conversion of the imperialist war into a civil war cannot be made any more than a revolution can be made. It develops out of a number of diverse phenomena, aspects, features, characteristics, and consequences of the imperialist war. That development is impossible without a series of military reverses and defeats of governments that receive blows from their own oppressed classes. To repudiate the defeat slogan means allowing one's revolutionary ardor to degenerate into an empty phrase or sheer hypocrisy. So I'm going to go through a little more. So, what is the substitute proposed for the defeat slogan? It is that of neither victory nor defeat. This, however, is nothing but a paraphrase of the defense of the fatherland slogan. It means shifting the issue to the level of war between governments and not to the level of the struggle of the oppressed classes against their governments. It means justifying chauvinism of all the imperialist nations whose bourgeoisie are always ready to say and do say to the people that they are only fighting against defeat. The significance of our August 4 vote was that we are not for war, but against defeat. Yeah, see, I mean, that's just a paraphrase. I'm not voting for Biden, I'm voting against Trump, so to speak. On closer examination, the slogan will be found to mean a class truce, the renunciation of class struggle by the oppressed classes in all belligerent countries, since the struggle is impossible without dealing blows at one's own bourgeoisie, one's own government. Whereas dealing a blow at one's own government in wartime is high treason. It means contributing to the defeat of one's own country. Those who accept the neither victory nor defeat slogan can only be hypocritically in favor of the class struggle of disrupting the class truce. In practice, such people are renouncing an independent proletarian policy because they subordinate the proletariat of all belligerent countries to the absolutely bourgeois task of safeguarding the imperial governments against defeat. The only policy of actual, not verbal disruption of class truce, of acceptance of class struggle, is for the proletariat to take advantage of the difficulties experienced by its government and its bourgeoisie in order to overthrow them. This, however, cannot be achieved or striven for without desiring the defeat of one's own government, without contributing to that defeat. So whoever's in favor of the slogan, neither victory nor defeat, is consciously or unconsciously a chauvinist. At best, he is a conciliatory petty bourgeois, but in any case, he is an enemy of the proletarian policy, a partisan of the existing governments of the present-day ruling class. Let us look at the question yet another angle. The war cannot but evoke among the masses the most turbulent sentiments, which upset the usual sluggish state of mass mentality. Revolutionary tactics are impossible if they are not adjusted to these new turbulent sentiments. So, again, what are the main currents of these turbulent sentiments? They are 1, horror and despair, hence the growth of religious feeling. Again, the churches are crowded. Number 2, hatred of the enemy, and a sentiment that is carefully fostered by the bourgeoisie, a rid of its economic and political value only to the bourgeoisie. And number 3, hatred of one's own government and one's own bourgeoisie. The sentiments that all class-conscious workers who understand, on one hand, that war is a continuation of the politics of imperialism, which they counter by a continuation of their hatred of their class enemy, and on the other hand, that a war against war is a banal phrase unless it means a revolution against their own government. Hatred of one's own government and one's own bourgeoisie cannot be aroused unless their defeat is desired. One cannot be a sincere opponent of a civil truce without arousing hatred of one's own government. Those who stand for the neither victory nor defeat slogan are in fact the side of the bourgeoisie and the opportunists, for they do not believe in the possibility of international revolutionary action by the working class against their own governments, and do not wish to help develop such action, which, though undoubtedly difficult, is the only task worthy of a proletarian, the socialist task. It is the proletariat and the most backward of the belligerent, the great powers which, through the medium of their party, have had to adapt, especially in the view of the shameful treachery of the German and French social democrats, revolutionary tactics that are quite unfeasible unless they contribute to defeat of their own government, but which alone led to the European Revolution, to the permanent peace of socialism, to the liberation of humanity from the horrors, misery, savagery, and brutality now prevailing. So, anyways, you could have interjected, by the way. You didn't have to sit there and listen. But in summary, what can we take away from that? What can we take away from that?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just dealing with my dog, and I got my dog.
It's
here with
fine.
me, so I was distractions, of course.
What can we take
So-
away from that? What do you think? What can we take away from that? Let's put our thinking.
Basically, I think what can be taken away from that is that basically nationalism is just a tool of the bourgeoisie, and we need everybody of their all proletarians of their individual countries need to engage in revolutionary defeatism, which requires turning an imperialist world war into civil class war internationally. So basically, we need internationalism. We need to not engage in nationalism, except for the oppressed nations that Lenin talked about, of course. Basically, I pretty much agree 100% with everything he said, basically.
Yeah. So this is the proper analysis and stance. It's an inter-imperialist war, more like an inter-imperialist proxy war. Ukraine, of course, being the proxy of US and NATO, between inter-imperialist powers. So in the face of this, the left-wing position is to stand in solidarity with Russian and Ukrainian workers, because they're ultimately the ones suffering the most from the fallout of this. And that it is the duty and responsibility of Russian and Ukrainian revolutionaries, as well as revolutionaries all over the place, to contact, build solidarity, build a proper international movement, and for all of us to take advantage of times of war and instability to basically work towards the defeat of our own governments, because it is the states as we know them now, which are tools of the bourgeoisie. They're the main violent, legal, political apparatus by which they exert their class interests, and that basically people need to engage in class struggle, not just locally, not just nationally, but on an international scale as well. The ruling class and the imperialists are an internationalist phenomenon, and so is the proletariat. So by extension, the global working class needs to come together to confront the imperialists and fight against imperialism. And if we're not at a stage where we can do that, to build the class consciousness, politics, and infrastructure, and carry out the radicalization needed to carry out and engage in such action. So this is the proper position. So no critical support for Russia. Sorry, I can't support this. Anyone who's supporting this has it all wrong. You've got your theory all wrong. You should not have critical support for Russia or the Russian state. You should have critical support for the communists in Russia against the Russian state, and hoping that these times of war among Ukrainian and Russian communists will be what it's needed in order to create the dissatisfaction, instability needed, and the radicalization necessary to spark revolutionary fervor and give them what they need to hopefully organize, put something together, and ultimately challenge and usurp the bourgeois states, smash the bourgeois states. In
And
other
just
words,
yep,
socialist revolution. That's the real stance that we need to take.
basically, yep. But just one caveat: when we mean by communist in Russia, we're not talking about the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, which I would classify as basically a fascist party.
They're
It is
controlled.
basically controlled. It is controlled opposition.
Yeah,
Basically.
fascism's that not quite. They're controlled opposition for sure. They are not like they're. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're opposition, but they're opposition in the same way that the Democrats are opposition to the Republicans. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they aren't exactly like the Dems. They're significantly further left, but my point is that in a situation where the Communist Party of the Russian Federation takes and holds power, Russia becomes a social democracy. That's the best case scenario. Russia's just a sock dem country. It doesn't go socialist again. That's not going to happen. You can only have socialism through revolution. But anyways, I want to answer a question, and I know we disagree on this, and this is something that even the article I referenced by those Maoists, but was the USSR imperialist? All right, so before we go into the next segment, I want to address this. So, a couple of things. No, because by definition, imperialism, as defined by Lenin, is a stage of capitalist developments, and the Soviet Union was not a capitalist country; it was socialist. However, there are Maoists that accuse it of being social imperialist. I mean, Gengros here, I'm sure, probably feels that way. So I guess this is a place where we disagree.
Uh,
So all I'm going to say is, so social imperialism was originally coined, a term that emerged around the era of Lenin and Bernstein. Hell, Bernstein was among the first self-described social imperialists, basically leftists that saw imperialism as beneficial to the imperialized countries. And Lenin actually used that term to describe the likes of Bernstein. Well, in the following decades, Maoists came and they more or less co-opted the term, and they used it to describe Soviet foreign policy and international aid towards Cuba, the Warsaw Pact, India, Pakistan, Myanmar, Egypt, and Vietnam, as well as a number of other developing third world countries. I don't think I don't really agree. I don't think what the Soviets did was imperialist so much as it was just them flexing their political hegemonic dominion over the communist world. Because, I mean, like it doesn't even really resemble the kind of economic activity. Like what the Soviets were doing, it wasn't even close to what modern day China or Russia is doing from a foreign policy standpoint. So
yeah, I think. But also, just to clarify as well, though, Lenin also did also call the Roman Empire imperialist as well.
yeah,
That was long before any monopoly stage of
yeah, but
capitalism.
it was empire
It was-
building under a different system.
Yeah.
That's why. So yeah, so I don't really. We can have a debate about this sometime if you want. I kind of want to move on, but I do want to.
Yeah, I don't really want to get too much into
Yeah,
it.
we can debate about it later. I have a video that I've had on the back burner for months that I've been meaning to produce about it. I'm way off in regards to the Communist Party of Russia. Have you ever? Yeah, I'm aware of their platform. I know they want to nationalize industry, but and supposedly they claim they want to do central planning. But my issue is like they want to do all this within the context of a government that it's a bourgeois democracy. Not really. It's a bourgeois democracy without the democracy, more or less. It's just a more direct version of a parliamentary system. I mean, it's just in very overt, direct ways. Money buys power and influence. So you're left with all the state machinery designed to accommodate the ruling class. You have large sects of the ruling class, which are still around and about. I mean, even if they really wanted to do that, you're not going to like you're not gonna you're gonna have to contend with them. So even in that instance, they would have to do revolution of sorts. I mean, it could be peaceful. I'm not saying it has to be violent, but I am saying it would take revolution, and the Russians would be facing a lot more international scorn if they went back to socialism. There'd be a lot of fear mongering, Red Scare, etc. I would love it if Russia went socialist. And I think, in theory, it's possible, but I don't think it's going to be through elections. It's going to have to be through. It's going to have to be through revolution. And with this post,
elections, yeah.
With this post, I concur. I've got a video about it I've had on the back burner forever. I will produce it in the future on so-called Soviet imperialism. For now, it is time to cringe. So now it's time for us to get into the reacting segments. What I have here is Vosh's Twitter. So actually, I'll just share. Sorry about this. I'll just share an individual window. Why not? So screen was canceled. Sorry about this, guys. Here we go. Let's share that. So this is what we got. Anarcho-NATOism. You guys ready for this shit? There's a lot of schizo posting. There's a lot of schizo posting that's been going on Vosh's fucking Twitter. But my point is that you've got NATO shills and you've got Russian shills. And they both have it wrong. They both have it wrong. And it is, I just stated what the real revolutionary Leninist, Marxist-Leninist, revolutionary communist position is. We don't have a stake in these fucking wars, dude. These wars kill people. It's competing bourgeois factions and global corporate factions competing to dominate one another for market share and for power and influence. We gain nothing by playing along with their fucking wars, and that we should oppose all of them because they are our class enemies. And this idiot here is a fucking NATO shill. I really think the Weimar Republic revolutionized fishhook theory. Jesus Christ. Talk about terminally online. Look at how many, I thought I was terminally online, bro. Look how much he fucking tweets.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous.
I explained already. NATO defined Bernie. Few people realize, confirm the stimulus. Just thinking Trotskyist invented my beard. It's just nothing but a nonstop scream. None of this is substantive at all. People still think Adam Smith stifled the redistribution of wealth. I got to thinking the Weimar Republic defined the working class. Defended? What? The Weimar government fucking enabled the rise of Nazi Germany. This dude doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
I talk about how
Zelensky created the Freikorps.
Should I talk about how Zelensky tried to fix history books? Just uploaded a video about how the N-bomb. No, Zelensky's a fucking pussy, dude. He capitulated to literal Nazis, but only fascists believe horse dogs. Dude, none of this is substantive. Why do people take this clown seriously? This is fucking ridiculous. So, let's go ahead and react to Vosh defending NATO. How's that sound? That sound good? So, you guys ready for some quality cancer? So I'll just share Chrome tab. All right, you ready, guys? Let's do it. I'm gonna speed this up a bit. Time for some peak cringe.
Vosh, for the love of God, can we not be pro-NATO? I don't understand how you're pro-Kurdish and pro-NATO when you're basically arm ISIS. What the fuck are you here for? What the fuck are you here for? What? Wait, how are the... What do the Kurds have to do with ISIS? They're anathema. What do you mean? What? Shut up. Fucking weirdos in here, man. But you know what? I am pro-NATO now. I am. I legitimately feel like NATO in its existence really doesn't do anything to materially suppress the cause for socialists worldwide today. And I feel like the insistence on hyper-fixating on NATO from the perspective of a leftist has been a psyop in favor of the Russian government.
Okay, so time for me to explain why exactly Vosh is absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. NATO was created after World War II as a counter to the Soviet Union and the Soviet-occupied Eastern Europe. It was a military alliance that was created in 1948, immediately after World War II, explicitly as an anti-communist organization. You had former members of the SS, high-ranking ex-Nazis that were integrated into NATO as officers and high-ranking officials within it, as well as the UN. On top of that, you also had a number of Nazis, which were, of course, absorbed into Western intelligentsia. You had the fucking Gestapo that basically became the BND. Like, West German intelligence didn't just absorb the Gestapo; it basically was the Gestapo. So yeah, no, it was originally created as a counter to the Soviets and eventually the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was created as a counter to NATO, and throughout the course of the Cold War, the NATO was basically their military alliance. It was an anti-communist military alliance that has been routinely bombing countries for decades, along with the United States. And with the fall of the Soviet Union, they just moved in to absorb Eastern Europe. But anyways. Yep. So that was the reason. That's literally the reason why NATO was created. It was created explicitly as an anti-socialist, anti-Soviet org.
And now it's basically just there for the money laundering through the military-industrial complex. Yeah. For example, now all NATO countries, I believe, are required to spend at least 2% of their economy on military spending. And ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, we have been seeing every country in fucking Europe just say, you know what, we're going to rearm. We're going to just start spending a shitload on money. And guess what that does? It saps from social spending.
Yeah, so no, they're pumping all that money in. So NATO, aside from the anti-socialists, I mean, it's an imperialist military alliance that acts as like the muscle of the European Union. But anyways.
I genuinely believe that, and I don't care anymore. All the imperialist action that NATO has taken is something that could have effortlessly been done by other just European or American military actions without the help of NATO. NATO itself doesn't facilitate anything other than protecting countries in Eastern Europe from aggression from Russia.
Okay, so this is the equivalent of arguing that there's a Pepsi. I live in a third world country, and a Pepsi plant has been built upstream, up the river where my village is at, and this Pepsi plant is polluting the fuck out of my stream. Myself and everyone in the village is contracting cancer. We're getting cancer. There's lead in our water. Getting lead poisoning. People are dying earlier and earlier. And Vosh comes along and he's like, well, yeah, they may be polluting your water, but if that Pepsi plant wasn't there, have you considered that if it would be a Coca-Cola plant there instead, or a Sprite plant, or a Mountain Dew plant? It was going to happen anyways. And, they're producing a really good product. People like their soda, so just get the fuck... Like, dude, this is straight up a fucking imperialist apologetics. Like, this dude's, like, straight up a fucking pro-imperialist shill. Like, this is such bullshit. Like, okay, if America didn't try to genocide off the natives, maybe some other European empire would have. That doesn't change the fact that, like, okay, that's a dumbass hypothetical. We should still oppose it because it is a wing of imperialism, and it is imperialism which we must oppose.
Yeah, 100%. I will take it. Yeah. I don't think NATO does that much at all, really, except for prevent. And this, to my knowledge, right now, what NATO does presently is prevent Russian imperialism. That seems to be the thing it's doing. Just admit you're a social democrat then and quit masking socialist. So you don't even know. What does socialism have to do with this? You don't even know. You don't know what these terms mean.
That's just straight up bullshit. NATO's been the one doing military buildup and encroaching closer and closer on Russia's border. Not the other way around. Russia hasn't really... I mean, up until now, Russia has not been fucking going around just conquering, like directly intervening, conquering and absorbing territories and threatening countries left and right militarily. The reason why it went into Ukraine is because it was threatened, backed into a corner, and pushed into doing so. It's so unbelievably incorrect. Like, seriously, the dude is just such... He's Russia-phobic. Like, well, we need NATO to protect us from the big, bad, barbaric Asiatic hordes. Like, it's straight up xenophobia and Russia-phobia. Is there really any difference between this asshole and a neocon? Just saying.
and this is the psyop, to you, socialism is when things sound anti-American. That's what it is to you. That's why there are so many online leftists who are hand-wringing in opposition to Russia, when Russia is more capitalist and fascist than the United States by almost...
Another stupid point. Like, this dude is just a non-stop bad takes factory. He's a bad takes factory. Like, that's not even, like, remotely fucking true. Again, Russia's not the one going around starving poor nations to death with genocidal sanctions. They're not the ones going around overthrowing sovereign governments and coups. They're not the ones militarily invading left and right. Yeah, they're an imperialist power, but, like, this is like, you know, this is like being covered from head to toe in mud and just completely covered in like a 1-inch thick layer of mud, while pointing to the person over there who's got like a tiny stain of mud on their t-shirt and being like, "You're covered in mud." You know, it's so stupid.
It's whataboutism.
It is. It's pure whataboutism. And like, why? It astounds me like how people take this dude seriously. Like, people really think this guy knows anything about anything. Like, he's just a pro-imperialist, pro-NATO shill.
Yeah.
Every imaginable metric, it is farther from socialism than the U.S. Russia makes the U.S., in comparison, look socialist. This is not a high bar to pass, okay? They managed to fall below it nonetheless. That's not my fault. Acknowledging that doesn't make me an imperialist. It is simply a statement of fact. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what do you mean Russia is less socialist than America is? Russia has a fucking national health care plan. It actually has a little bit of state infrastructure, a tiny bit. There's actually like an active socialist, there are active socialist communist parties within their government. Like, so, I mean, they're not socialist by any means, but the point is like, they're, in some regards, they're way further left than the United States is, which really isn't like much of a fucking achievement, you know? But anywho.
I have yet to see anyone provide for me a convincing argument. What exactly does NATO do that is imperialism? Please let me know.
Oh man,
Afghanistan,
I can name quite a few examples.
Serbia.
Dude, aren't there like several?
Libya.
There are several countries that the U.S. and NATO are like bombing at this time. Libya, Yugoslavia. Those are just the ones that immediately come to mind. Let's see.
Afghanistan. Well, until I guess recently, but now they're just sanctioning Afghanistan to death. So.
Countries bombed by NATO. Let's do it. Let's do 1999 present. So Serbia and Kosovo since 1999. And then we have Bosnia. So yeah, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Then we have their operations in Macedonia, U.S. airspace, Mediterranean Sea, Afghanistan, Turkey, Pakistan. Oh, look at all these countries. I mean, NATO isn't the primary military arm of imperialism. That would actually be the United States. The U.S. is the one that does the bulk of it. NATO was created as a reaction, as a bulwark against the Soviet Union in Europe. That's the reason why it exists. But otherwise, yeah, no, it routinely bombs countries as well. Don't kid yourself.
Oh, you know, you've
like fucking Switzerland and Germany. Like they're in the process of pumping like billions of dollars of arms into Ukraine as we speak. Switzerland arms dictators. Same with Sweden. Like, these countries fucking export a shit ton of guns and back and provide support to reactionary governments all over the goddamn globe. They are facilitating to make the world an objectively worse place. They are backing these fucking anti-communist, far-right, right-wing dictators that are explicitly anti-socialist and anti-communist, Vosh. Same with the United States. NATO does it too. They both do it. It's just NATO less so. So, like, how can you honestly sit here and be like, NATO doesn't hinder socialism at all? This is the dumbest fucking take. Like, fucking seriously.
Yugoslavia and Libya. Okay, fine. Well, the European powers would have been incentivized to do that either way. The NATO alliance wasn't the thing that allowed that to happen. It was just framed through that. It seems a little
dumb. Again, back to my original point. Oh, There's a coke plant that's polluting the water, poisoning all the villagers in my hometown. Again, well, if it wasn't a coke plant, it would be a Pepsi plant. Yeah. I mean, what kind of fucking ridiculous fucking point is that? Like, yeah, it doesn't change the fact that it's still happening and it's still being done. NATO could be called Kurgo Blitz for all I cared. It could be called window glasses. It could be called lamp shading. It doesn't matter what they fucking call it. It's the institution, and it still needs to be frustrated and opposed. This is a complete and total non-argument. And like him harping about anti-Americanism, being like, oh, it just sounds like a vessel, like for people to be anti-American. Anti-Americanism is based. America is, for all intents and purposes, the great Satan. Guys, this is what an American exceptionalist and a national chauvinist looks like.
Yep.
Odd to frame it that way. Hassan was talking about NATO. This is the level of brain rot I think people are on right now. Hassan was talking about NATO as though NATO invades countries to make them a part of NATO, like it's an occupying force. And his audience is many times larger than mine. So I think a lot of people, that's what they think of. Like, well, what does NATO do? Well, NATO invades countries and bullies them into join. Well, no, you petition to join NATO. What?
Yeah, no, not how it works at all. Not how it works at all. NATO absolutely fucking bullies countries, either directly or indirectly into joining it. Like, because you don't really have a choice. You either kowtow and get in line with the Western hegemon or Western colonial bloc and submit to austerity and economic restructuring, or you don't do that, and they just sanction you and they just make life very difficult for you. So, I mean, there isn't really much of a meaningless choice. Like all the Eastern European countries were in fucking shambles. Many of them opted to get absorbed into NATO because they needed some kind of economic support. I mean, shit, dude. I mean, you've got like Poland and a couple other countries like Estonia that are just propped up as fucking Western client states, more or less. Just they're just vassals to the EU now. So like, it's just so stupid. Like, oh, like, dude, they absolutely do it. It's through combination of foreign direct investment, other types of investment. The reason why they fucking went in and bombed Gaddafi is because he threatened their hegemony. He was trying to establish an reserve currency for Africa, and he wasn't willing to play ball. He wasn't willing to kowtow. So we ended up destroying his regime. We just went in there. We had NATO bombs, murder a bunch of people, plummet the country into chaos, and we fucking had Gaddafi raped to death with a knife by Western assassins. So yeah, no, dude. He's a fucking, like, imagine thinking this guy's a socialist in any meaningful capacity.
What does that do? The argument I keep running into is that NATO is basically America. Okay. The powers in Europe are aligned with America anyway. If they want to join NATO, they're already in our geopolitical hegemon. If you say like spreading the interest of NATO is part of the US geopolitical hegemon, then okay. If they want to be a part of it, that's part of their national sovereignty.
I'm just gonna skip ahead because he's not making any arguments here.
Okay, that's like, well, in order to be a part of this geopolitical hegemon, like, you need to have the thing every country has, and no country is even close to not having. Well, yeah, of course, right? Like, yeah, the USSR had a market economy. I mean, there's no alternative to that, it's at all. So the
Soviet Union had a market, but it did not have a market economy. It had markets, but it didn't have a market economy. Whenever you are exchanging use value, whenever you're exchanging goods, whenever there's trade, whenever there's money involved, and there's circulation of currency and commodities, you're gonna have markets in some capacity or another. Like, so again, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I got him to admit on stream that he doesn't even know what markets are. He doesn't know anything, dude.
Yeah, he himself admits he doesn't read theory, so
he doesn't know shit, and people want to look to that point where, I lost my cool and I laughed at him, and so cringe. Yeah, no, I'll tell you what's really cringe is someone who is a self-proclaimed market socialist not being able to provide basic economic definitions for the point of engaging in a debate. He's a fucking idiot. Like again, why people take this guy seriously is just beyond me. But anyways, what was he going to say about the Soviets in Warsaw? What else can I debunk here?
There's no alternative to that, it's at all.
That's capitalist realism right there, my friends. There is no alternative to the market. Not true.
So the Warsaw Pact was okay because the countries were aligned with the USSR anyway. The concept of countries choosing to enter a defensive alliance with the Soviet Union to protect themselves against invasion is great. Did the countries in the Warsaw Pact all choose? Hey, are you familiar with your history? Are you familiar with the history of the term tanky? When the USSR had to roll in military forces to force countries to stay part of their hegemon?
Yeah, because they had to, in a sense, because whenever one of these countries threatened to join NATO, whenever one of them threatened to break away or just be independent, it threatened Soviet hegemony. So because they were all very poor countries that were trying to establish themselves from nothing, because they didn't have the level of wealth and in ideological and cultural entrenchments that was needed in order to allow that sort of consensualness in the first place. Yeah, like, dude, this like the second like take the United States for example. Let's say you see socialism emerge in some U.S. states, and there are U.S. states that are voting to succeed and they're voting to break away. Uh, like a block of U.S. states. You think America is just going to consensually let that happen? You don't think America is going to roll in with the tanks and roll in with the military to stop that from happening? Like, considering the degree to which the US government has stomped out socialism, like literally fucking everywhere. So, like, it's okay when the US government does it. It's okay when fucking America goes around stomping out socialism and just so they can impose capitalism. But then when like the Soviets move in to thwart a potential uprising, which could lead to capitalist restoration and create geopolitical holes in their national security, it's a bad thing. No, dude, every state exercises force and authoritarianism to some extent or another. The Soviets needed to do it more because they were not wealthy enough and because socialist psychology was not entrenched enough to keep these socialist states reproducing themselves. Maybe given enough time and development, they probably could have gotten to that point, but point is that it was ultimately betrayed by weak leadership. So unfortunately, socialism actually requires you to have strong leadership. It actually requires you to have ideologically committed political thinkers and bureaucrats and officers and leaders, people that actually care about a cause greater than themselves. That's what it actually requires in order to function. So, like, when you liberalize and when you give people the ability to just liberalize and do whatever they want, you're by design going to get cynical opportunists that are just going to try to ruin it for everyone so that they themselves can get fucking rich. It's class warfare, my friend.
Yeah. And plus, the United States, they did very similar things. Like, they didn't do it on the same scale. I mean, like, they didn't, literally roll in the tanks or anything like that. But we already know about Operation Gladio. We already know about the United States covertly supporting far-right terrorists in Western Europe during this time. I mean, they were supporting, like, the United States was supporting fucking Franco, a literal fucking fascist who was engaged in something called white terror in his country, where he had literal concentration camps and shooting people. And
Pinochet is another famous one. The White Army, the White Guardists in Russia had like the universal blessing and backing of the Western colonial powers. But yeah, no, I agree. Defending NATO and upholding and identifying with imperialism and pushing American exceptionalist propaganda to trigger and own the tankies. Exactly what I'm talking about. It's funny how anarchists say tankies not socialist when they're bourgeois individualists that always side with liberalism. Yeah, it's called, my friend, is called projection. It's pure projection. When you hear these fucking anarcho-liberals, like, I kind of differentiate. You have true anarchists, and then you have the anarcho-liberals. Vosh is what I call an anarcho-liberal. basically these people have internalized petty bourgeois individualism to such an extent they can't see the forest for the trees. Anything Bosch says about us not being actual socialists and us being basically against the interests of the proletariat, anything he says about Marxism, Leninism, or actually existing socialism is pure projection. He knows not what he's talking about. By his own admission, he doesn't read books. So,
to my knowledge, we have not recently invaded France, though we should, to convince them to stay with us. In fact,
we didn't need to. We didn't need to, because they're so economically entangled and entrenched with our businesses, and they're still aligned with us. We don't need to worry about France defecting and going socialist, because they're fucking not. On the other hand, you have all these fresh new regimes that are born out from bloody World War II that are not stable, well-established, entrenched regimes, which very could flip and go the opposite direction. The issue is like the socialist countries, Warsaw, weren't as wealthy. They couldn't buy off the social peace with the spoils of imperialism like the Western countries could, and they didn't really have enough time to completely embed and entrench themselves, and in the end, they ultimately got betrayed from above by their own weak leadership that ended up capitulating to the pressure. So,
UK had their Brexit. They left the EU, and they were allowed to. It was a stupid decision. I disagree with it. I think it was dumb, but they were allowed to. But yeah, if it was the countries of Eastern Europe and they autonomously made the choice to join up with the USSR and what have you, this is the reason why. And this is the reason why so many leftists online are pro-imperialism, as long as it's not being done by the US, okay? They need...
You don't know what imperialism is. Like, that's such a loaded statement. Like, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist powers of the world, the predominant capitalist powers of the world are constantly trying to impose capitalism wherever they go. So the socialist bloc and the socialist bloc countries should be willing to do the same thing. And no, it wasn't fucking imperialism. It's not imperialism when you directly subsidize the developments of other countries and help them develop their own independent, self-sufficient economies so that they actually can stand up on their own 2 feet and have some fucking dignity for themselves. So, yeah, again, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's economically and politically and historically illiterate. And for whatever reason, people treat this guy like he's an expert just because he's got a deep voice and he's good at talking.
To downplay imperialism when it's done by their side, so they overstate imperialism when it's being done by the West. For instance...
Okay, name one genocide. Name one genocide the Soviets and Chinese are guilty of. Just name one genocide.
Holodomor.
Not a genocide. Natural disaster, famine. Next question.
They claim that 2014 in Ukraine, the ousting of their leader was some kind of pro-Western coup. They talk about it like it was a pro-Western Nazi coup, like we literally installed a government. Now this...
No, but we definitely had backing and support. I don't understand how this guy can recognize how the coup in Bolivia, like he's super sympathetic to South American leftists. I don't understand how he can be super sympathetic to Bolivia and nuanced and understanding. Like, he understands that Jeanine Inez was definitely a CIA plant, definitely a psyop of some sorts. Like, he fully believes and understands the role historically the CIA has played in regime change. He understands it when it's Bolivia and Evo Morales. But when it comes to Ukraine, all of a sudden, it's hard for you to believe that the pro-Russian regime was just conveniently ousted and replaced by a pro-NATO regime? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with Vosh if it wasn't for the fact that he had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I don't necessarily even have a problem with this guy being a bad takes factory and who actively spreads imperialist, anti-communist Cold War propaganda constantly while reaffirming liberal hegemony. It's the fact that he does this while claiming to be a socialist. And he does this while claiming to be a socialist while having the subscriber count that he does. So to such a perverse extent, he is just poisoning the discourse, creating so much confusion and creating this spawning an entire generation of what I call basically social neoliberals. Like, that's what it is. He's creating a whole generation of social neoliberals, social democrats, social fascists, people who are like left of center, but committed, ideologically committed anti-communists. And
Yep.
it's absolutely fucking cursed.
And pro-imperialist.
This is objectively, factually not the case. It's very plain to see this is objectively not the case. We had a guy on who tried to defend that point, and it went really, 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 really poorly for him. No one will ever be able to defend that point in a straight-up conversation. It's not possible to, because it's not true. But they have to pretend that's the case because they want us to be the monsters that they justify and defend. We need to be that bad in order for their propaganda on their side to work. Now, hey.
Wow, speak for yourself. Like, dude, it's funny. Like, if you swapped the Warsaw and socialist countries for US and EU and vice versa, that would actually be a way more apt description. So guys, let's go. I got a little PDF for you guys. Triumph of Evil by Austin Murphy. I want to show you guys a little something. Triumph of Evil PDF. So let's switch to this tab instead. So let's talk about evil. You guys want to talk about evil? Let's read a little book. This is a good ass fucking book right here. So let me go ahead and look for Introduction and Objective Analysis of Relative Position. So let's go to page 21. Look at U.S. atrocities. So here's the list of atrocities and genocides committed by the United States. And this isn't even a complete list. But yeah, India, Filipino, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Iraq, other. Not counting the millions of people who are starved and killed by preventable illness due to our fucking sanctions. We've got 11 million minimum. Soviet Union has not done anything like this. I mean, yeah, people can point to like Afghanistan, and I mean, a lot of innocent people died, but they didn't kill millions of people in Afghanistan. No, not even close. And they haven't engaged in anything resembling just like this deliberate, blanket, systematic exterminations of peoples. Like, are you fucking kidding me? The Soviets weren't the one raping and pillaging the world. They were trying to help build it up. They were trying to help save it. So yeah, read Triumph of Evil from this segments. If you take like the top 10 most bloody regimes in history, Russia and China don't even come within the top 10 ranking. Like, honestly, they don't. Like, really, it's really America, Britain, France, Germany, and Spain. Those are pretty much like the top 5. And then the rest of them aren't even fucking, the rest of them aren't even communist regimes. They're all capitalist regimes. Like, dude, how are you going to fucking sit here and look at freedom fighters like Ho Chi Minh? Look at freedom fighters like Ho Chi Minh or Kim Il-sung or Fidel Castro. I don't understand like how you're going to look to figures like this and you're going to say like the Soviets are committing atrocities and crimes against humanity. When you consider that the opposite end of it was like the evil reactionary side that was basically feeding all of their people to the grinders so that only like 2 to 3% of the indigenous population could benefit from imperialism, these comprador capitalists. It's so crazy to me. This either demonstrates a massive amount of ignorance on his end or he's just being a propagandist. He's literally like deliberately being a propagandist. Maybe he is ideologically committed or genuinely convinced that the Soviet Union was what it was. But the thing is, people have tried to come on and explain that it wasn't that bad. I have tried to come on and explain it wasn't that bad, and they actually saved a great deal of lives and did a great deal of good for the world. I kept trying to explain this. And you want to know what he did? He's just like, oh, I wouldn't talk about saving the world from fascism. They almost joined the fascists, and made this loaded fucking argument about the Soviet Axis talks or the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is totally, it doesn't even fucking prove the point he was trying to make.
Yeah. I think he's just a fluent propagandist, honestly, if you want me to be quite frank.
Yeah, at this point, I just think someone's fucking paying him. Like, maybe not. Well, actually, he is being paid. He's being paid by all of his dumbass subscribers, but I think someone else is probably paying him. So, because, no wonder why he's so adamantly against communism. He's a multi-millionaire. He's basically a member of the ruling class. Like, of course, he's going to be adamantly aligned against the interests of the global proletariat. But yeah, no, Soviets, if you actually look at their record and compare it to the US and NATO, Soviets aren't guilty of anything even fucking touching the Western imperial powers. Like, not even close. Not even close.
Yeah.
Hey, listen. If you care about American imperialism, if you think American imperialism is so bad, why not talk about the times that it actually happens instead of making shit up, right? Like, why not?
We do talk about it, but then you fucking downplay it or disregard it. Like, you brought up 2 examples of NATO imperialism and just blew them off as like just not being that big of a deal.
Yeah.
They're like, dude,
or
like,
they're necessary. Yeah.
Like, this is what pisses me off about liberals. They will always condemn something in the abstract, like previous acts of imperialist aggression, and like previous acts of U.S. fuckery and meddling that have literally resulted in the deaths and immiseration and displacements of quite literally tens of millions of people. They'll always say it's bad in the abstract and say that these things were always bad. Like, but this time it'll be different, right? If we just get involved here, if we do this there, if we participate in a regime change here, if we do some sanctions there, Vosh is getting his wishes, man. And the Russian people are going to suffer for it because of those sanctions. Vosh is getting his wishes. He's getting his genocidal sanctions, which are probably going to be placed on Russia. So, like, he's just a piece of shit. Like, why does anyone think this guy is left-wing or take him seriously at all? Like, fucking seriously, dude.
Not focus on the stuff we actually do. Our support of Saudi Arabia and Israel are monstrous and indefensible. Frankly, the fact that we are so buddy-buddy with China in spite of all the shit they do is also pretty suspect.
What the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, oh, what, Uyghur-stan? Are you talking about the Hong Kong protests? China? Like, China is another imperialist power economically, but again, they don't even come close to the United States or the track record of the Western European powers. So, yeah. So again, like, yeah, liberal moralism. That's all it is. It is. It's liberal moralizing. He doesn't actually like look at the history and take an objective look. He's like fundamentally incapable of critically thinking or engaging with the data that is presented with him because he is so emotionally attached to his outlook. He's so emotionally driven and emotionally dedicated. He's so turned off by the aesthetics of communism. He just doesn't like the aesthetics. He doesn't like the optics of it. So he's going to do everything in his power to distance himself from it because he's shallow. He's a shallow, ignorant, arrogant narcissist, basically. So yeah.
He's basically just a Democrat.
Condemning something bad in the abstract. He said, I mean, yeah, he condemns Saudi Arabia and Israel, and that's great and all, but like,
their client regimes.
Yeah, no,
US.
and I mean, this is probably the only way where I agree with him is that. But the thing is like in his support of Ukraine, but he doesn't support the Ukrainian people. He supports the fascist, crypto-fascistic Ukrainian government. Like, that's what he supports, and that's where I disagree. Again, this is what an incorrect take looks like. I'm going to watch another minute of this, and we're going to move on, because we're getting close to the 2-hour mark, and I want to wrap up. So let's finish up with this. Another minute.
You know, but they wouldn't agree with that, right? All the shit we've done in Latin America, all the shit we've done in Central America, all the shit that we've done, our unwillingness to engage in proper, economic, non-conditional investment in Africa, the fact that we still back the IMF and the World Bank and let them ruin developing countries so they're amenable to American business interests. If you care about American imperialism, which you should.
Okay, so all that is fucking true, but you're still supporting the military apparatus of fucking imperialism. So how does that work?
Like he's still supporting NATO. Let me explain his mindset. This is the mindset of a liberal, right? He's not tackling this from the position that these things are systematically, institutionally bad, but it's not actually because it's an inherent aspect of imperialism. It's because it's being mismanaged. It's not imperialism done right. It's not a good war. It's not a good intervention. It's not a proper U.S. intervention. It's not a good war. He's coming at this from the mindset of, yeah, all those previous actions are bad and these actions are bad, but we need to reform the system. We need to make better imperialism or more friendly foreign policy. We need to reform it so that it's more tenable. It's not as morally, it doesn't hurt our moral sensibilities as much. We can reform it. But the point is that there is no reforming it. And he analyzes it from the mindset that it's just incompetence. Like, the imperialists are just incompetent. Like, they don't know what they're doing. Like, that they're incompetent. We're just the big jumbo lumbering empire. This is the analysis Chomsky gives, that America is just a lumbering empire that doesn't know what it's doing, but it actually means well. It doesn't mean to, do a little genocidal sanctions there, a little carpet bombing there, a little economic restructuring here. No, or a little coup here and there. No, it always means well. It always means well. Okay, so did fucking Hitler, dude. So in that regard, he's tackling it from the mindset of a reformist. Like, he wants to reform it and make it better. He's tackling it from the mindset where he is identifying with the state apparatus in the US and NATO. Like, he's not tackling it from the mindset of a revolutionary, where really you should be looking to smash these things and replace them with a new regime based on a new set of socialist proletarian values. No. So that's the mindset of the liberal. That is the mindset of Bosch. They will always condemn things bad in the abstract. They will always condemn past actions of aggression in the abstract. And then, because they identify with imperialism in the current system, they'll take the naive interpretation that they can reform it and make it better. And that, though what our government does is bad, even though like what we do is monstrously objectively evil, this therefore justifies us taking a magnifying glass and looking at the bad actions and, misconduct of other governments and other regimes, putting a magnifying glass over it, analyzing it, and then blowing it up way, way, way bigger so that they can try to put it on equal moral footing to condemn that other government and make them out to be just as, if not more evil, or just as a bigger threat to the world as the United States. It's this equalizing they do. It's basically like a pot calling the kettle black, more or less. It's equalizing. That way they can justify selectively supporting regime change, selectively supporting interventions and wars and sanctions here and there. This is an imperialist, people. This is the mindset of an imperialist. And with that being said, I'm done. I'm done with Bosch. Let's move on.
It's imperial management, basically. That's what he wants. He wants imperial management. And when you were talking, I was thinking to the Bernie Sanders 2016 and 2020 campaign. Bernie Sanders would have been great for U.S. imperialism. He would have kept this shit going a lot longer than it probably would last. But, the ruling class just doesn't want to give up even a little bit. Like, they will literally just, go out of their way to even sabotage their own interest just for the short-term profits.
Yeah, so anywho, so that's enough of Vosh. I wanted to react to 2 Caleb Maupin vids, but let's just do one. You sent me 2, breaking down Putin's Ukraine speech, and the second one was in regards to, here we go. So we got the pro-NATO imperialist shill. Now let's talk about the pro-Russian imperialist shill, Caleb Maupin. Why should working people support Russia? Let's just react to this, because I don't have much time left.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and react to this instead and maybe do some of Putin's speech. But anywho, breaking down Putin's Ukraine speech. Or not that one, but share this tab instead. All right. So Caleb Maupin is coming at this from the opposite end of the spectrum. Instead of, bending over backwards, doing whatever mental gymnastics needed to do apologetics and uncritically support the West, NATO is bending over backwards and doing mental gymnastics to justify unapologetically, uncritically supporting the East. In a famous speech, Caleb was like, I will never sling mud at Russia or China. Came off as like, oh, well, I will uncritically support them no matter what. I will never condemn their actions, even when they've clearly gone in the wrong. So, yeah, that's basically where we're at right now.
I can't hear anything.
Okay, so there's about several things wrong with this statement.
I couldn't hear anything, so I don't know if anybody else on the
Oh, here, I'll
stream
I'll speed it up. I'll speed it up. It's probably because let me. So it's probably because I don't have the audio checked off. Yeah, share audio tab. So, climate change. Why should American people support Russia? So,
Why should the American working class support Russia?
can you hear it now?
Yeah.
All right.
Because support for Russia and support for China and support for the anti-imperialist countries and opposition to Wall Street walk hand in hand. What the imperialists are doing.
Wait, what? So again, China and Russia are imperialist powers in their own right. They're just minor imperialist powers that exist in the periphery, or not. Well, they're world powers. They're just aligned against the U.S. and NATO, and but they're still economically imperialist. Like, so what do you mean anti-imperialist, Mom?
China literally bailed out Wall Street, and here's another thing he does. So basically, he'll bring up like things like Wall Street and bankers or international bankers and other such things instead of talking about the capitalist system entirely. He's only talking about one specific section of the capitalist system.
He talks about the bankers specifically, which I mean is a dog whistle for the Jewish question. I'm not saying Caleb Maupin is a Nazi, but that's kind of a neo-Nazi talking point or a fascist talking point. You know,
I think
implying
he's a fascist,
that there's,
but
it's implying that like there's a conspiracy, and that if we take out these conspirators, we can reform the system and make a system that's better for everyone. Caleb Maupin has some very pseudo-fascist ideas, and he derives a lot of his thought process from very pseudo-fascistic thinkers like LaRouche. Not saying Maupin himself. You might think he's a fascist. I don't, but I think he spends a little too much time in the company of people who are fascists. So, you should just talk about the imperialists, the bourgeoisie, rather than trying to isolate a singular demographic in all of this. Like, really, don't say bankers. I mean, it's literally a JQ dog whistle, because that's what Nazis talk about when they talk about the Jews,
around the world, and what they are doing to America and the working class of America are the same. They are trying to grind us all into poverty. They are trying to lower the population. They are trying to set the stage for their high-tech, low-wage economy. The problem.
You don't think Russia and China are doing that? You fucking dunce.
And lower the population. Okay, so basically, this is a conspiracy theory. This is basically this is some really retrograde, old school conspiracy theory about population degrowth. This is the kind of shit you heard at the Freedom Convoy. You remember that one guy? What's his name? Pat, whatever the fuck his name is.
This is the same shit. No, it's a conspiracy. They're trying to depopulate, which is also part of the fascist line of reasoning, because they're afraid that the white race is being depopulated and that the black and brown races are being interbred and intermixed with all the white folk, and that they're going to breed out and make the white race go extinct so that the Jews can get back at the goyim or something. That's basically how the conspiracy goes. That's why they have the gay agenda. That's why they have depopulation. Caleb Maupin is very much playing to a fascist audience when he does this. He's very much playing into this conspiratorial thinking, this fascistic thought process, where instead of analyzing systems, you look at conspiracies and you look at certain things that are to be singled out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. Again, I just want to reinforce, I'm not saying Caleb Maupin is a fascist, but he plays into fascist rhetoric, and he spends a great deal of time in the company of people of that mindset.
Problem of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit and the general law of capitalist accumulation. The way that they plan to resolve it is by canceling millions of working people, by lowering consumption, reducing consumption, lowering the population. They are Malthusian. They are vicious. They don't have a place for us in the global assembly line any longer. And in order to keep their profits rolling in, they have decided to engage in this kind of activity. And
okay, so Not true. It is not within the interests of the bourgeoisie to shrink GDP and curb consumption, and in an ecologically sustainable manner while meeting human need. That is not on the agenda of the capitalist class. The Great Reset, the whole concept of the Great Reset, is to establish a kind of rentier vampire economy where you do sustainability and you make a more sustainable economy so that you can curb consumption and still have like civilization. But it's a rentier system where people pay rent to use all of the things that could otherwise be distributed according to need. That's
And he's misusing the word Malthusian. So when Malthus was talking about, what he was talking about, he wanted his idea wasn't to limit growth or any of this fucking bullshit. He wanted to deal with the cumbersome working class population by grinding them down through working them literally to fucking death. He wanted them to literally just kill them off through other means, through just like the shit that people die through, fucking treatable diseases and fucking obesity and everything else. And that's what they mean, not this fucking population degrowth fucking new world order shit.
Populations are shrinking. World populations are shrinking in developed and developing nations because there's a number of factors for it. It's actually kind of a complicated topic, but fertility rates tend to go down for a number of reasons in developed nations and advanced countries. One of them is for the simple advent of modern medicine. People are living, child and infant mortality is a lot lower in the first world, so men and women are less likely to have as many kids because a lot of those kids are going to survive into adulthood. Another reason why is because for economic reasons, people are putting off having kids into later and later years now so they can enjoy their youth more. There's a lot of reasons why, because we live in a hyper-fixated, hyper-work-oriented society and culture that just grinds people into the dust, working them. And yeah, that's another thing.
And you can't afford having kids in this fucking economy.
In this economy, no. And like the Soviet Union had very pro-natal policies. And under the modern Russian Federation, there's like no support for women and children, no economic security for women and children.
Yeah, you used to get like a medal in the Soviet Union if you had like 10 children or something.
Yeah,
like that.
They had very pro-natal policies, and that's why their population was consistently growing. And it's been crashing because fertility rates are through the floor. Thousands, tens of thousands of women are sex trafficked annually. And now, you have an aging population and a shrinking pool of fertility rates. So there's no grand conspiracy, my dude. There's no grand conspiracy behind this. It's just a number of socioeconomic pressures which are influencing the growth rate and the reproduction rate of populations. That's why demographic scientists estimate in a lot of calculations that by the year 2100, human population is going to stabilize and flatline at around 10 to 11 million people, and that it's not really going to get any bigger than that. We're going to basically peak at 10 to 11 million, and that's where we're going to stabilize once the entire world has modernized and, has advanced, basically.
That is why it is necessary. You can't talk about fighting Wall Street and repeat and help them colonize Eastern Europe. You can't talk about fighting Wall Street and support their hypocritical anti-China hysteria. It walks hand in hand. There is a common destiny for the working class of the United States and the people of the world. It is the same struggle against the imperialists.
Yeah, no, hold on. Right here.
It is a common destiny for the working class of the United States and the people of the world. It is the same struggle against the imperialists. And we have to beat that drum over and over and over again. There's no separation between the struggle. The struggle against Big Pharma is a struggle of the working class of the United States and a struggle of the people. There is a common destiny for the working class of the United States and the people of the world. It is the same struggle against the imperialists. And we have to beat that drum over and over and over again. There's no separation between the struggle. The struggle against Big Pharma is a struggle of the working class of the United States and a struggle of the people of the world. And the struggle, against the prison industrial complex. And
you see, I wouldn't have a problem with this if he wasn't treating China and Russia like they were genuine dictatorships of the proletariat. Like, if you want to make an argument that China is a dictatorship of the proletariat, I mean, fine. I mean, if they are, they're a really fucking shitty one, if you ask me, for a lot of reasons. But fine.
They are definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would classify them as a corporatist state.
No, they're corporatist, state capitalist country with, some socialistic components mixed in. But otherwise, modern day China is significantly further from the socialist path than they were under Mao. And but in regards to that, Caleb is talking about Russia and China like they're they're basically the USSR, like they're Mao's China, the Soviet Union. He's stuck in the 1950s, man. These aren't the same regimes. They're not the same countries. I agree with you, Caleb. I agree with him when he says that we need to stand in solidarity with the international proletariat. Where I disagree is standing with these governments. We should stand with the people against all the dictatorships of capital. That's where I differ, and that's where my stance lies. All these fucking Maupinites who are, saying that, oh, Russia's doing a good thing. They're regurgitating Russian propaganda that, oh, we're going into Donbass to liberate ethnic minorities and stop the Nazis, to stop a genocide in Donbass. First off, you can't substantiate that. And two, not every man, woman, and child, all the 1.5 million refugees and the thousands of civilians that have died in the wake of this war, not every last one of them is a Nazi, is the second thing. And three, handling the Nazi problem in Ukraine, there are other ways of handling it besides invading and bombing and driving a bunch of people out of the country. And fourth, if Russia really gave that much of a fuck about Ukraine's Nazi problem, if they really cared about, the sovereignty of Donbass, they would have moved in like 7 years ago. They wouldn't have waited all the way up until this point, like literally when Ukraine was getting ready to join NATO, to like move in and like invade. So there's no evidence. There's no fucking evidence whatsoever. They're literally just taking the Russian government at their word. And I don't know why. Fucking Putin is a fucking anti-communist oligarch, and the Russian government as we know it now is a fucking imperialist, irredentist, Bonapartist oligarchy. It's a Bonapartism. Modern day Russia is a lot closer to fascism than it is to socialism in a lot of respects.
The struggle against police brutality.
And the same goes for China. I'm not going to call China fascist, but I'm just saying they're closer to the fascist form of capitalism than they are than they are socialism, excuse me.
Is the struggle against U.S. imperialism. And it's the same state apparatus. It's the same big corporations and monopolies and banks. And you have to connect these struggles. And,
I agree with you, Caleb. I stand against the monopolies, the banks, the Wall Street, the imperialists. That doesn't just include the United States imperialists. That doesn't just include Western European imperialists. That includes the imperialists of the East. Even though they're a lot more minor and even though they're a lot less influential, they are still our class enemy. They just pose less of a threat at this time. And that's really it.
To be fair, though, they could pose a much greater threat than even the United States in the future.
Yeah, in the future, yeah. If you let them grow and fester, then yeah, they're going to expand their sphere of influence, their wealth, the markets that they dominate, and they could become a very big threat in the future. They're just not as big of a threat now, which is why I prioritize the fuck out of being anti-US and NATO. The other reason why I'm ultra anti-American, not just because America is the world's principal empire, but it's also because America is the number one roadblock to socialism. And the third reason is because it's my home country. You should focus nationally on doing and making socialism in your home country first and foremost.
And it's stolen land too. So.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're helping them take down Russia, how can you then protect the people of the United States?
We should be helping them take down Russia while at the same time, being aided in the taking down and the overthrow of our own government. Revolutionary defeatism, bitch. That's the Leninist policy. not your policy. You stand in solidarity with the Russian government. And my friend, that is incredibly cringe. That is incredibly blue-pilled. Why, Caleb, you say you're a socialist, a communist, right? Why is it that you're standing in line with Putin and his oligarchy that are going in and murdering innocent people, driving thousands of families, hundreds of thousands of families out of Ukraine, and engaging in active hot warfare? Why do you stand in solidarity with Putin's anti-communist government that really just keeps the Communist Party around on a leash as controlled opposition, more or less. But otherwise, yeah, it's an anti-socialist, anti-communist government that's aligned with fucking Israel, that's aligned with, what are some other countries they're aligned with that are really problematic?
Saudi Arabia, China.
Thank you. Yeah, and same goes with China. These countries do fuck all to help the international proletariat. This invasion does fuck all to help the international proletariat. It does nothing for the people of Russia. It does nothing for the people of Ukraine. In fact, both the people of Russia and Ukraine are suffering substantially for this. The Ukrainians, because they're being attacked by a hostile Bonapartic oligarchy, and Russia, because they're about to get strangled by sanctions, strangled into the dirt by sanctions. So who does this war help, Caleb? In the grand scheme of things, who does this really help?
Helping them go after China. How can you protect the working families of the United States? If you're going to fight them here, you got to fight them over there. Right?
That's neocon propaganda.
Yeah.
That's literally what neoconservatives were. That's the same rhetoric they were using to justify fucking going into Iraq. Listen to that again.
China, how can you protect the working families of the United States? If you're going to fight them here, you got to fight them over there. All right. And that there's one global economy. There is one imperialist, monopolist system that is threatening the people of the world. There is an emerging alternative, the Belt and Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union, the Bolivarian alternative for Latin America. And we got to stand with that, right? And it's really important. Look, there's a reason that Nicaragua, Venezuela, Iran, the Houthis, there's a reason that they've all recognized the People's Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. There's a reason for that. Right, because they understand the connection. We got to make that.
Because they're buddy with Russia. They're friends with Russia.
Okay, so he's conflating a whole bunch of fucking shit here. So basically, recognizing Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbass republics, that's not the same thing as supporting fucking invading Ukraine. He's conflating. Now, when he talks about, he used the neocon talking point. Because Caleb is not anti-war. He supports the war on terror. He just supports it when Russia and China do it. Like, you know that Russia, China, and the U.S., they're all very, very much on this so-called anti-terrorism, because they want to destroy the fourth world. They want to get rid of all these fucking tribes, label them as terrorists, be it with the Uyghurs. I don't agree that the Uyghurs are being genocide, but there is a cultural genocide going on. Their culture is getting removed. We can agree with that, and that is wrong, but it's not a genocide.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The U.S. and the Western countries are fucking the epitome of evil and have done irreparable damage to the world and have been actively holding us back as a species for a while. But that can also be true, while at the same time, Russia and China being hegemonic powers of their own, with their own cynical self-interest in mind, that want to keep the capitalist system going in their own right, because they have their own national ruling classes that are trying to protect their interests and trying to make money. And so saying I align with Russia and China, all you're doing is telling me that you just align with their imperialists against our imperialists. You're not really aligning, despite what you say about aligning with the proletariat. Okay, so you say we stand against the same struggle, against the same group of people. He's basically trying to conflate. You are right about the conflations, conflating Russia and China with being dictatorships of the proletariat fighting for working. Fuck no, not even close. So Caleb, for your position to be true, you would have to substantiate the point that Russia and China are dictatorships of the proletariat, and there is a colossal mountain of evidence to suggest otherwise. And he will never confront me on this because there is no argument. Like, Caleb filters and selectively brings people into his circle, and only brings people into his circle who he knows will rim his asshole. Those are the only people that Caleb brings on. If you don't rim his ass, and if you show any sort of tiny sign that you're even slightly critical of him and his ideas, or that you might actually use theory to call him out on his bullshit, he's just gonna block you on Twitter. He's gonna ignore you. He's gonna remove you. And yeah, it is what it is, man. I mean, whatever. So that's all I have to say about Caleb Maupin. He's an irrelevant cult leader. In the grand scheme of things, he's ultimately inconsequential. I'm not really going to talk about him as much anymore. I've already aligned my differences with him pretty solidly. I've got better things on my mind. So,
But did you wanted to do the Lenin, his critique of Putin and the Lenin thing? Because I find that really good, at least in terms of like theory discussion. Not so much about Caleb, but just about like, Marxism and the national question with Stalin.
Well, I'm unfortunately running well over the
2 hours.
A lot of time. We can do this next week, and we can talk about it next week. But for now, I feel like this is sufficient. So I'm going to read some comments, and we're going to go ahead and get going. So
Sounds good. Definitely.
Caleb is very cynical. He's a cult leader. I mean, why do you think he treated Jason the way he did, lying about Jason and demonizing him the way he did? It's because Caleb was fucking trying to consolidate his base. It's the same reason why he does his black and white thinking, where you're either with my left, the right left, or you're with fucking Jacobin and Breadtube.
And have you noticed he talks a lot like Haas now? He does like the Haas thing with like the over emotional acting, and he's been using a lot of like fuck and retard recently in his streams. I've noticed it. He's not doing this professional thing.
Yeah, no, he's not as professional as he used to. So yeah, he's being influenced by Haas. But the other thing is like you're either pro-socialist billionaires or you want everyone to be poor. Like there's no middle ground. And then you're like backing Russia and China and acting like we should uphold their models and societies. It's asinine, dude. He's just a fucking chill. He's just a fucking stooge. He's a red social democrat, more or less, a dangist, an opportunist, right opportunist. He would rather fucking simp and pander to Trump supporters and downplay the importance of the indigenous people's struggle and black and brown Americans, saying like Black Lives Matter and land back are just co-opted by corporations, and so that he can fucking turn around and pander to the right. So Jackson, Haas, Caleb, right opportunists, all of them are. So I feel most Malthusians are just labor aristocrats and petty bourgeois. Yeah, no. Overpopulation is a non-issue. The problem isn't the number of people, it's the way the resources are distributed. If we had an equal distribution of the resources and we distributed them in an environmentally sustainable manner where goods were produced according to use value, people shared things and tools communally, and we recycled everything, then we could support a pretty high standard of living and quality of life for everyone on Earth. Maybe not like buy a new iPhone every year, a new television set every 6 months. Maybe to not that degree. Maybe not everyone drives a fucking car. But we could support a pretty good quality of life. It would by no means be that bad. So let's see what we got.
I'd like to maybe Gordon Zinn comment. The invasion might shatter NATO's legitimacy. No, if anything, this has done the exact opposite. I mean, I'm not saying NATO's good, but in terms of like the public, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to fucking NATO.
Yeah, dude. Do you see how many fucking people are on board with supporting Ukraine? I'm seeing Ukrainian flags around my city. Like there's protesting everywhere, anti-war protesting. Everyone's harping in on it because they're like, yes, finally, an intervention that is morally legitimate on behalf of the US and NATO. At last, we found a good war we can support. See, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have the friendly imperialism that does the right thing from time to time. You know what I'm saying? These are the same group of people when they were complaining about women's rights in Afghanistan, and then Afghanistan, they turn around and sanction Afghanistan. Fucking crickets. The loss of women's rights is pretty bad, guys. You know what's a lot worse than the loss of women's rights is people having food. I would say the loss of food is a lot worse than that.
Yeah, the loss of women, period.
Yeah, so there is one last thing I wanted to do. Let's scroll through Haas's Twitter. So
The Ottomans are socialists.
Yeah, let's scroll through Haas's Twitter, and then we're gonna call it. We'll do this for a few more minutes. That sound good? I don't really want to go further. So let's share screen. Yeah, why not? We'll do the whole screen. So here we are. Let's scroll down. You guys want to see Schizo posting?
Okay,
Green,
so
Russell Truth.
right fucking away. Look at the fucking flag he's got. He's doing the same thing. Fucking what's his face? Vosh, that fucker.
Me tribe good, you tribe bad. That's what this shit is. Us versus them. You sound like a legit pervert pedo. You wouldn't know this, but Friday nights are when most people get their wieners touched, so maybe Sunday. Oh, yeah, no. Haas, all he can do is deflect, project, and call people fucking perverts whenever they call him out for being a virgin.
He's doing the QAnon thing, where he accuses anybody of being a pedo, basically.
Here's what he does. He acts like he postures like he's an alpha Chad. Then he does something incredibly cringe, or he gets proven wrong on something. So he goes full ego defense mechanism. And when he comes off as like a really cringe, try-hard incel, and people call him out on his bullshit, he's like, "Ooh, you have sex? You're disgusting pedos." Like, motherfucker, why are you posturing like a slayer and then showing your ass frequently like this? And then when people call you out on it, you're just gonna fucking deflect and call them fucking perverts. Like, what the fuck is that shit? Oh yeah, his actual height. In my humble opinion, Ukraine should be entirely annexed via the formation of a new union state. The West has already used almost all of their cards. So, eating Ukraine. Just completely absorbing Ukraine. Irredentism. So, that's straight up irredentism.
Yeah,
wow.
That is straight up colonialism in the traditional sense. Like he's literally saying, Ukraine, the concept of Ukraine as a nation, like I'm not talking about like an actual country, I'm talking about a nation. Germany existed for fucking centuries prior to the German Empire existing in 1871. Ukraine existed as something called the Kiev Rus centuries prior, like even prior to Russia forming, really, or was it Moscow, the Duchy of whatever the fuck it was called. But the point of the matter is, it's existed since like the 12th century, basically.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying, nah, actually, he's agreeing with Putin that we need to, like, annexate it because, Lenin was wrong, apparently, or something.
Yeah, fuck land back. Like it's straight up colonialism, more or less.
He's also saying fuck Lenin and fuck Stalin too.
Yeah, no. So this is just ridiculous to me. Like how he's just gonna brazenly advocate for that, because what does that suggest about all of his good shit that he talks about supporting decolonization and all that? Because he's like, he'll pay like lip service to it, and then he'll be like, oh well, it's all virtue signaling. Like when push comes to shove, this dude is basically pro-colonial imperialism. He's just pro-colonial imperialism when the Russians are doing it. They're like seriously, it's pure ideology. All of my enemies are scum. Russia's existence makes them screech in pain and agony. Right-wing psychology and talking point. Seeking this fucking beta male cry, wreathe and whine. Bro, motherfucker, you post like 50 times a day on Twitter, and all you do is argue with people and cry about people fucking calling you out on your bullshit. You have no fucking life, dude. Like, and you're gonna sit here and call other people beta and bitches when you've frequently shown your ass, and you've I'm just saying, like, for a guy who loves to posture like an alpha, you sure do act like a little fucking childish bitch. So Sid from Ice Age. Note one person in these quote tweets can answer it. Where does Marx say this? Which philosopher is it? Marx? Please don't. I don't know who he's arguing with. I am not exaggerating or being a hyperbolic. We are entering fascism. We warned you in 2016 when big tech cracked down. Again, right-wing talking point. Tech companies are censoring me. January 6th, upholding right-wing putsch. Again, fascist talking point. Let's see what else we got. Liberals and progressives online are mostly former Nazis who become LGBT, or who became LGBT. Besides that, they are exactly the same. And honestly, there's nothing incompatible. Look at the early days of the essay. So I gotta pee. I will be right back. One moment.
So
go ahead and talk.
Yeah. So basically, he said, what is he saying right here? Let me look at this shit, because this is. They only left Nazism because they think it wouldn't accept their LGBT identity. Take away the LGBT and you got full blown Hitlerite Nazi. Paz, do you want to tell us something about your sexuality, what you're saying? Because I'm seeing a lot of projection here. What the fuck are you even talking about here? You're conflating LGBT with Nazism. In hell. And I know he said he's claimed that he supports LGBT and all these other things, but then you're doing shit like this and just going around saying fucking literally again, this is like some old school 2000s fucking homophobia right here from like, what was it, like the pink swastika? This is like, yeah, that's just some really fucked up shit he's saying.
All right. So speaking of dogs, I'm joined by a dog. How's it going, my Dougie? I've got my Dougie with me here right now. So where were we? Yes, we were just reacting some infrared cringe.
Yeah, he's engaged in like, he's basically, so what I was saying is he's basically he's using the same argument from like the pink swastika, where he's like basically saying LGBTs are Nazis or some insane shit like that.
Yeah, like
even though he claims that he supports LGBT or some insane shit like that, while also supporting things that don't support LGBT.
No,
Russia.
Not that's not even it. It's really just him like constantly like the negative dehumanizing implications that he has to say about LGBT. Like, look, he's saying that, you know, a bunch of LGBT people are Nazis, or that the reason why Nazis just, you know, they stop being Nazis when they become LGBT or whatever silly ass shit. Like, what was it he said? Where is he? Okay, so liberals and progressives online are mostly former Nazis who became LGBT. So yeah, you know, beta leftists, LGBT, liberal degeneracy. That's the pipeline that he plays into. He just fucking panders to people's reactionary sentiments left and right because he himself is a reactionary. He's just a fucking pro-Russia shill. Zelensky thinks he's an equal to Putin, as if this is a fight between two symmetric superpowers. People believe this.
It's good to know that he supports superpowers and imperialism.
So, to be confirmed. Yeah, maybe. That probably is fucking Ukrainian propaganda. I don't think their losses are that high. But
who knows?
The liberal Nazis, anti-human scum, are laughing because Western sanctions against Russia. The West is a dying bloc. China has everything they even offered, and Russia and more. The union of Russia and China will wipe liberal Reddit empire from the face of the earth. And this guy goes by Sultan Haas the Cruel, right?
Yeah. I wonder what Haas would have said in like the 1930s or 40s.
I don't know.
The Haas of their time, it would have been like, yeah.
Russia should withdraw from recognizing all Western copyright and IP laws. All Western software and digital media should be starved of any revenue from the Russian market. Let's see what else we got.
You're not hearing anything about socialism from these tweets.
Yeah,
but-
no. When was the last time you heard him mention class warfare, really? When has he talked about the bourgeoisie? So far, all he does is shill for Russia and his fucking warped-ass interpretation of socialism. The difference between me and people like Destiny is that I don't have to use any Photoshop. He actually looks like this. Okay, dude. Have you seen pictures of yourself? Like, you're not really that impressive yourself, bro. You just look like a fucking skinny fat girl, bro. So, like, seriously. America and Europe are entering a new era of barbarism, and Russia has the honor of making the first move in a prolonged and global war of resistance against a dying empire. I stand against Putin. So, again, like, dude, you know what the fucked up part about this is that when we were reading Revolutionary Defeatism earlier, Lenin was calling people out for posturing like they were anti-war and pro-defeatist, but were really, in effect, basically siding with their governments. In my opinion, this is even worse because, like, leftists of today don't even pretend to have the principal position. They don't even pretend to have the correct line or stance. He's just straight up saying, I stand with Putin. Bosch is just straight up saying, I stand with NATO. Like, look at this shit, dude.
And they're siding with another national bourgeoisie. They're not even siding with their own national bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're even worse.
Yeah, dude, that's so stupid. Oh my god. No evidence to support any of this. And point this out, but the truth doesn't matter. Of course, none of this matters without the truth being on your side. Zelensky is truly a remarkable leader. Everyone's sucking Zelensky's dick just because he's staying in the fucking country and not leaving. Like, just because he's staying within the capital. Like as though that's supposed to make him like, oh yeah, he's like Stalin in World War II. He was, in Moscow, staying in his country, helping form war plans. Zelensky's fucking telling young people, women, and children to take up arms and sending them to go and fight and die against a stronger, superior force. He's getting innocent people killed with that shit, dude.
Gotta send the Hitler Youth out to fight. You ever watch the movie Downfall? If not, you really gotta watch the movie Downfall. It's about the last 10 days of Hitler's life during the Battle of Berlin. It's a fucking amazing film.
He's arguing with some fucking Ukrainian fucking stan, some Ukrainian stan. I don't care. I really don't. As far as I'm concerned, these people are two sides of the same coin. Like right here. Two sides of the same coin, comrades. Right here. Look at that. In fact, I'm gonna...
Exactly. They got the two different flags, yeah.
I'm just gonna do this. Oops. Yeah, and I'm gonna post this to my Twitter later. So, let's talk. Two sides of the same coin. Sorry about this, guys. Well, let's go back a little more.
Yeah, and I also have the highlight of actually highlighting actual Ukrainian socialists. Like this one guy I found. I supported him. He's a self-described national communist in the sense of not, Nazbol, but the communism of Hungary under the Soviet era and Germany is what he describes himself as. So, there's I could post his link in the thing, but I think we need to support socialist in basically both countries. And once again, it's not this fucking country dick riding bullshit.
Look, like, I love Bosch's post right here. Least bloodthirsty tanky. Ukraine is winning. If this were the 1950s, Bosch would be using the term commie. If this were like the 70s or 80s, he'd be using the term Stalinist. He would like this shit's ridiculous. So, like, someone's like, he's retweeting this. It's just a map of the war so far. Someone's making the point that Ukraine is winning. They're really not. I don't think they are. I fucking love war.
Win,
I want to
lose.
fucking kill
It's like
people.
win, lose. Like I don't even like. It's so ridiculous under capitalism. It's like, the thing is though, the military-industrial complex of Russia and NATO, they can make a killing off this if they keep this going for fucking years and years and years. Sell a lot of weapons. Just keep it going,
The
Stupid.
group of countries with more blood than any. Here we go. I'm just going to tweet at Vosh. There you go. This is a quote tweet. I should have made it a quote tweet, but whatever. Yeah, so cheerleading Azov. So yeah, no, it's great. They both have points. So, or good points. He has good points about Ukrainian simps. He has good points about Russian simps. But you're both wrong. You're both still wrong. You both have the wrong line. And it's just crazy. The absolute poverty. There is an absolute poverty of Marxist analysis, proper Marxist analysis and advocacy. Current Social Democratic Party allied with the Nazis. So yeah, now he's doing this shit to say like, oh, liberals are the real fascists, pretty much.
Not the Freedom Convoy in fucking Canada you supported, you motherfucker.
Yeah,
Supporting the fucking Nazis. Yeah. And
yes.
I have heard these patsocks say the United States has a right to invade Mexico. Just remember that. They have said that. So.
Yeah, he's saying that progressives are just LGBT or are like Nazis but LGBT friendly. No, progressives are just fucking libs, dude. It's not that serious. How who else stayed in his bunker in his country? Hitler. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing impressive about what he's doing. But anyways, I may or may not go live again tomorrow. It's up to you guys. I could do this for a little while, but I think I'm finished for now. I'm going to get going. We've been streaming already like over a half hour longer than I initially planned. So yeah, I'm going to get going. I didn't review everything that I wanted to review. I've got a few stream clips from this stream that I do want to segment, but is there anything you would like to say before we dip?
I think I did want to talk about, well, we can talk about it later. The whole Marxism and the national question, because that is actually somewhat less to do with Maupin, more to do with Putin, Russian nationalism, and the whole, Lenin and Stalin's, theory on nationalism and self-determination of oppressed nations.
Yeah, we can have a theory stream next week, but for now, before I leave, I actually should have talked about this earlier, but I wanted to leave you guys with this. I did a little cringe compilation of infrared. So Haas said, here's a little something said. If I had attractive haters, my whole worldview would collapse. I'd reevaluate my whole life, but so far attractive people only send me encouragement and support. And in response, he's got like sexy women sending him pictures. I look like this and I think you're a dumbass, so start reevaluating, buddy. Got another one right here. Yeah, more sexy women. Yeah, so
and in order to own them, Haas comes out as gay.
Yeah, no, and Haas is just like, oh, you're all disgusting creeps. Oh God, all these women sending me these sexy women sending me sexy pictures. You're all creeps. You're harassing me. Like, for someone who claims to be a pussy slayer, he is sure repulsed by vagina, don't you think?
Yeah. It's all about this sexual degeneracy, and it's like, well, then why the fuck are you acting like?
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being gay or bi or being a virgin. It's that Haas postures like an alpha slayer while doing it. And it's just really cringe and pathetic. And like, it's crazy how much he copes. This guy doesn't think Stalin was a patriotic socialist. Again, He was patriotic towards the Soviet Union, not the fucking Russian Empire. What does that quote have to do with anything when Marx explicitly said that class struggle is national in form? No, he said that the class struggle, that you should focus on class politics within your own nation and prioritize building socialism in your own nation, you moron. He wasn't saying that you should exclusively focus on like nationalism. Marx was an internationalist. So yeah, you're full of shit. I got a couple others. Check this out. Seeing all these lefties wreathe and squirm to make up excuses for why they hate their homeland is childish and pathetic. Grow up. Again, national
Literally.
chauvinism,
Homeland, a literal Nazi fucking
right,
talking
another,
point.
yeah,
But yeah,
more right-wing posturing, right-wing talking points, because they always obsess about triggering and owning the libs. That's like a cornerstone of right-wing and far-right politics. They don't actually have any principles or give a fuck about anything. They just, they're so pathetic that all they care about is making people angry online. So yeah, I've got reactionary nationalism. You can't be a man if you don't love your homeland. If this country isn't your homeland, then go find one and go fight for her. Yeah, right-wing, far-right nationalist propaganda. This guy is not a socialist. He is not a left-winger at all.
you are on settler colonial stolen fucking land. And I'm going to say this again, you white-ass motherfucker. I don't give a shit if he's fucking Arab or not. And I know people have said this, but he's
white.
White motherfucker.
Dude, he cashed in. The second he came out as a patriotic socialist, he cashed in his Arab card and officially became white.
Yeah. He's got a lighter skin than my father, but my father worked in construction, so he's got.
Your hatred has only fueled my growth. Why assume my goal is to be lucrative to human garbage? Oh, exactly. Yeah. Triggering and owning the libs. Yet again. I got one more quote for you before we leave. I just want to reveal, because this is very revealing to me. Having an understanding of class isn't grounded in suffering or power. It is an important step to being able to have a mature and scientific understanding of class. Marx is not an encyclopedia of emotional grievances, as American leftists think. So he is conflating the scientific Marxist world outlook with not being about power or immiseration or class warfare. That's basically what he's doing. He's conflating the two and by equating them like this. And so having an understanding of class is absolutely about power, and Marx absolutely acknowledged the suffering of everyday working people and stated how that general immiseration and the class contradictions would lead to that immiseration and dissatisfaction and would ultimately drive people towards revolution, because that suffering would eventually become so great that they have nothing to lose and the world to gain by rebelling. Again, this is straight up revisionism, downplaying or shafting class politics just so you could continue to appeal to your increasingly right-wing nationalist base. There's a lot of money in being a right-wing nationalist. You know that, right? A lot of money
100%.
Yeah, no. Like, as it turns out, people who are right-wing nationalists and conservatives tend to have a lot of money, and they tend to like the system as is, and they tend to have a lot of material investment in the current system. So they're not really going to be in favor of changing it or opposing it. And a great way to make money online is to grift off of rich people. It's to appeal to their reactionary sentiments, appeal to their liberal sentiments, shit on Marxism, shit on leftism, and not actually be principled or actually stand for anything, and instead just be a fucking opportunist grifter that's going to say whatever you need to appeal to the lowest common denominator. That perfectly describes Haas, Jackson, and Caleb, and Bosch, and the rest of the people within this sphere and bubble. Fucking the only difference between Haas and Bosch is size. Haas wishes he was as successful as Bosch, but in the grand scheme of things, they're one and the same. So now I'm finished. So live stream is officially over. I will give you the floor. You can say anything you'd like before we end it.
I would just suggest, if you guys want, I'll post the link in the video. Me and Dark Synovia already did a reaction to to Caleb talking about what's his to Putin with like what he was talking about with like Lenin and all that. So I'll post that in the chat right here, where Caleb engages in his anti-communist tirade about why Lenin and Stalin are wrong and why Ukraine and Belarus shouldn't be nations.
Yeah,
this goes into why he hates Native Americans and the idea of having self-determination for African and natives.
So we can actually, if you'd like, we could probably cover that either tomorrow or next week. I'll be down to stream for an hour next week, or an hour tomorrow, say at like 11 a.m. if you're available. Want to stream tomorrow at 11 a.m. for an hour to cover this?
I could probably do that, yeah.
All right, well, then I'll go ahead and make the stream. We can talk about it off air, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream. You all have a nice day. See you tomorrow. We will be going live between 11 a.m. and noon tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in to this weekly episode of Chaos Under Heaven. I am your host, Fellow Traveler. This is my guest, Gangros. See you guys tomorrow.
Salute.
Peace. Solidarity.